Welcome, one and all, to Pika Fiction. Today's enchanting tale is what if Cynthia and Lorelei competed to be Ash's mentor and ended up falling in love with him. If you enjoy our storytelling, please like, subscribe, and share. Every bit of support helps us grow. Now, prepare yourself for the journey ahead. Chapter 1, The Convergence. The elevator doors opened, and Ash Ketchum stepped into the marble corridor of the Pokemon World Association's headquarters like he'd walked into the wrong building. He hadn't. He'd checked the address 3 times, and Pikachu had checked it a 4th, pressing his nose against Ash's Pokegear screen and chirping in confirmation. But the PWA's Indigo Plateau offices looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought intimidation was an architectural style: vaulted ceilings, polished stone floors that reflected the overhead lighting like dark water, and portraits of former league presidents staring down from gilded frames with expressions that suggested they'd never lost a battle or laughed at a joke. Ash adjusted the collar of his jacket. It was the nice one, the one Delia Ketchum had bought him last birthday, dark blue with a sharp cut that made him look, in her words, like someone who might actually own an iron. He'd left the hat behind today. That had been a deliberate choice, and it felt strange, like going into battle without his lead Pokemon. But he was 19 now. Certain things from childhood needed to stay in childhood, even if Pikachu's weight on his shoulder remained the most constant thing in his life. Pika, Pikachu murmured, ears swiveling toward the end of the hallway where a pair of glass doors led to what the summons letter had called the Presidential Assembly Chamber. "Yeah, I see it," Ash said. "You nervous?" Pikachu gave him a flat look. "Right. Stupid question." He scratched behind Pikachu's ear and started walking. "Let's find out what they want." The receptionist at the desk outside the chamber was a young woman with green hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked up from her terminal, saw Ash, and her professional mask cracked just enough to reveal something like surprise. "Mr. Ketchum. You're early. Is that bad?" "No, she caught herself. "It's unusual. Most of the delegates aren't expected for another 40 minutes. "Delegates?" Ash leaned on the desk. "The letter said this was a strategy meeting." "It is. For approximately 60 of the most powerful trainers in the world." She paused. "Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Water? Got anything for him?" Ash tilted his head toward Pikachu. The receptionist blinked, then smiled, a real one this time. "I think we have some orange juice in the staff kitchen. He'd love that." "Thanks." She left to get it, and Ash drifted toward the floor-to-ceiling windows lining the corridor. Indigo Plateau spread out below him, the competition stadiums, the training fields, the dormitories where he'd stayed during his first league challenge what felt like a lifetime ago. He'd been 10. Reckless, loud, completely unprepared, and absolutely on fire with the kind of certainty that only comes from not knowing enough to be afraid. He was still certain. But the fire had changed. It burned slower now, hotter, with the controlled intensity of a forge instead of a wildfire. Pikachu pressed closer against his neck. "I know, buddy." Ash watched a flock of Pidgeot wheel across the sky below. "Whatever this is, we handle it like we handle everything." Pikachu's tail twitched in agreement. The receptionist returned with a small cup of berry juice and the news that several delegates had arrived early as well. Ash thanked her, made sure Pikachu was happily occupied, and pushed through the glass doors into the assembly chamber. The room was enormous, a tiered amphitheater ringed with curved desks, each one equipped with a screen and microphone. The PWA seal dominated the far wall behind a raised dais. Maybe 24 people were already scattered across the seats, most of them in quiet conversation. Ash recognized faces immediately. Elite Four members, gym leaders, former champions. The concentration of power in the room was staggering. He found a seat near the middle, not hiding in the back, not posturing in the front, and settled in. Pikachu hopped from his shoulder to the desk and continued working on his juice. Over the next half hour, the room filled. Ash exchanged nods with people he knew. Lance arrived in full cape, which Ash had always privately thought was a bold fashion choice for someone over 30. Bruno walked in with the kind of physical presence that made the air feel heavier. Flint from Sinnoh dropped into a seat nearby and immediately started complaining about the temperature of the room. Then the side entrance opened, and the noise in the chamber dimmed like someone had turned a dial. Cynthia Sharona walked in. She moved the way her Garchomp battled, fluid, unhurried, every step carrying the quiet certainty that the ground was grateful to be walked on. Her blonde hair fell loose over one shoulder, and she wore a simple black dress that somehow looked more authoritative than Lance's entire cape ensemble. Her gray eyes swept the room with a warmth that didn't quite mask the razor-sharp intelligence behind it. She saw Ash. Something flickered across her face, recognition, then pleasure, then something softer that was gone before he could name it. She inclined her head toward him. He raised a hand in greeting. Cynthia took a seat in the front row, because of course she did. The chamber continued to fill. Ash was watching Flint try to convince a clearly uninterested Glacia that fire types were objectively more versatile than ice types when the main doors opened again, and another wave of quiet spread through the room. Lorelei Konna entered like winter arriving early. She was tall, taller than Ash had expected from television appearances, with auburn hair that fell past her shoulders and glasses that caught the overhead light and turned her eyes into unreadable mirrors. She wore a tailored white blazer over a deep blue blouse, and she carried a leather portfolio under one arm with the same ease most people carried a newspaper. Her posture was immaculate. Not stiff, controlled. Every angle of her body said, "I know exactly where I am and exactly what I'm worth, and if you're smart, you do too." She didn't scan the room the way Cynthia had. She walked to a seat she'd clearly pre-selected, sat down, opened her portfolio, and began reviewing notes. She hadn't looked at anyone. She didn't need to. Everyone was already looking at her. Ash studied her with open curiosity. He'd watched her battles since he was a kid, the way she used ice types with a precision that made the cold feel like a scalpel. He'd never met her in person. A gavel cracked against the dais, and President Charles Goodshow took the podium. He was older now, his beard fully white, but his voice still carried the same booming energy that had opened every league conference Ash could remember. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know many of you have busy schedules, so I'll keep the preamble brief." Goodshow adjusted his glasses. For 60 years, the Pokémon League has operated as a collection of regional bodies, separate champions, separate Elite Fours, separate hierarchies. We've cooperated, certainly. But we've never truly unified. He pressed a button, and the wall behind him lit up with a holographic display. A tournament bracket, massive in scale, filled the screen. The Pokémon World Association is announcing the inaugural Grand Masters Tournament. A single elimination competition open to champions, Elite Four members, and select wildcard entries from every recognized region. The winner will be crowned the first ever world champion, a title that carries authority above any single regional championship. The room erupted. Not in chaos, these were professionals, and most of them had probably heard rumors, but in the kind of intense, overlapping conversation that happens when powerful people realize the game just changed. Ash heard Lance mutter something sharp to Bruno. Flint leaned forward with his eyes blazing. Stephen Stone, who'd slipped in without Ash noticing, pressed his fingers together and looked thoughtful. Cynthia didn't react at all. She'd known. Ash could tell from the way she sat, perfectly still, watching the ripples move through the room with the detached interest of someone who'd already thought 3 steps past this moment. Lorelei turned a page in her portfolio. She'd known too. Goodshow let the noise run for exactly 12 seconds before he cracked the gavel again. The tournament will be held in 8 weeks at the Coronet Arena in Sinnoh. Full rules and bracket seating will be distributed by end of day. But there's a secondary matter I'd like to address, one that concerns our wildcard entries. The display shifted to show a list of names. Ash's was third from the top. These trainers have demonstrated exceptional ability at the regional level but have not yet held champion or Elite Four positions. The association believes they deserve a place in this tournament. However, given the caliber of competition they'll face, we're recommending that each wildcard entrant receive formal mentorship from an established champion or Elite Four member during the preparation period. Ash felt the weight of the room's attention settle on him like a physical thing. He kept his expression neutral. Pikachu's ears went flat, not in fear, but in the focused alertness that preceded battle. Good show continued. We've received interest from several potential mentors, but two in particular have put forward compelling cases for one specific wildcard entrant. His eyes found Ash. Mr. Ketchum, if you'd stand. Ash stood. He didn't rush it, didn't fidget. He met Goodsho's gaze evenly. Two of our most distinguished members have expressed interest in serving as your mentor for the tournament preparation period. I'd like to invite them to present their cases. Goodshow gestured. Champion Cynthia Sharona of Sinnoh. Elite Four Lorelei Khanna of Kanto. Cynthia rose from her seat with the same fluid grace she'd entered with. She turned to face the room, and Ash, and smiled. It wasn't a political smile. It was the smile of someone genuinely excited about something. I've watched Ash Ketchum battle since he challenged the Sinnoh League at 15, she said, her voice carrying easily without amplification. What I've seen in him isn't something that can be taught. His ability to connect with his Pokémon mid-battle, to adapt in real time, to find angles that no tactical framework would predict, that's instinct. That's a gift. She looked directly at Ash. What I want to offer isn't a system or a regimen. It's refinement. I want to help him trust what he already has while giving him the tools to channel it against opponents who won't leave him room to improvise. I've been champion for 9 years. I know what it takes to battle at the highest level, and I know what it costs. I can prepare him for both. She sat down. The room was quiet in the particular way that follows something genuinely impressive. Then Lorelei stood, and the quality of the silence changed. She didn't smile. She walked to the center of the floor, opened her portfolio, and tapped her screen. The holographic display behind Goodshow shifted to show a series of battle recordings, Ash's battles. 12 of them, spanning 4 years. Silver Conference semifinals against Harrison, Lorelei said, her voice cool and precise as a surgical instrument. Ash leads with Pikachu against Kecleon. Brilliant adaptation, he uses Thunderbolt on the wet field to create a conductivity trap. But watch. The footage advanced. He loses focus when Kecleon uses Camouflage. He panics. His response time drops by 1.3 seconds, and he relies on raw power to compensate. He wins, but he shouldn't have been in danger. She flicked to another battle. Then another. Each time, she identified the same pattern with surgical accuracy, a moment of brilliance undercut by a tactical gap, instinct compensating for a lack of strategic planning. Ash Ketchum is not a diamond in the rough, Lorelei said. She removed her glasses and cleaned them, a gesture so deliberate that Ash understood it was part of the performance. She wanted the room to see her eyes, clear and sharp and absolutely certain. He's a blade that's never been properly forged. His instinct is extraordinary. Champion Cynthia is right about that. But instinct without structure is a liability at the champion level. Against opponents like myself, or Cynthia, or Lance, opponents who can sustain pressure across 6 Pokémon for 30, 40, 50 turns, instinct alone will shatter. She replaced her glasses. I don't want to encourage his talent. I want to build the framework that lets his talent win. Consistently. Against anyone. She returned to her seat. The room buzzed. Ash remained standing. He'd listened to both of them with complete attention, and he was doing something he'd learned the hard way over 9 years of travel, he was thinking before he spoke. But first, Goodshow spoke. Given the strength of both proposals, the association has a suggestion. He looked between Cynthia and Lorelei. An exhibition match between the two candidates. The winner serves as Mr. Ketchum's sole mentor. The buzz became a roar. Champions and Elite Four members leaned forward. Even Stephen Stone uncrossed his arms. Cynthia turned in her seat to look at Lorelei. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Ash watched something pass between them, not hostility, not quite respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement of one apex predator by another. "I accept," Cynthia said. "As do I," Lorelei said. Goodshow nodded. The match will be held in 2 hours on the main stadium. Full 6-on-6. Standard League rules. The chamber descended into chaos. Ash sat down, scratched Pikachu behind the ears, and watched the two most powerful women he'd ever met prepare to destroy each other over the right to train him. "This," he murmured to Pikachu, "is going to be something." The Indigo Plateau main stadium had been built to hold 40,000 people. For an unscheduled exhibition match with 2 hours' notice, it had somehow filled to capacity. Ash stood at the railing of the VIP observation box, arms folded, watching the field below. The stadium's retractable roof was open, letting the late afternoon sun paint the arena in gold. The battlefield was standard league regulation, compacted earth with terrain variation zones that could be activated by the referee. Lance appeared beside him, cape billowing despite the complete absence of wind. Ash had long suspected the cape was rigged with tiny fans. "Hell of a thing," Lance said. "Which part?" "All of it." Lance leaned on the railing. "Cynthia and Lorelei haven't battled each other publicly in 6 years. The last time, it ended in controversy. Cynthia's Garchomp was accused of moving before the call. Nothing was proven, but Lorelei's never forgotten it." He glanced at Ash. "You know they're not just doing this for you." "I know. This is about pride. About philosophy. About which one of them gets to shape the future of competitive battling by shaping its most promising new face." Lance's dragon-sharp eyes studied him. "That's you, by the way. In case the subtext was too subtle." Ash almost smiled. "Thanks for the clarity. What I'm saying is, be careful. Both of them are brilliant. Both of them want to win. And whatever you see down there in the next hour, remember, you're the one who has to live with the outcome." Lance clapped him on the shoulder and disappeared into the box's interior, where a cluster of Elite Four members from various regions had gathered to watch. The stadium announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, an unscheduled exhibition match sanctioned by the Pokémon World Association. On the red side, Sinnoh champion Cynthia Sharona." The crowd's roar hit Ash's chest like a physical force. Cynthia walked onto the field from the red tunnel, and she'd changed. Gone was the black dress, replaced by her battle attire, dark slacks, a fitted black coat with silver clasps, her hair pulled back. She looked like she'd been born on a battlefield. On the blue side, Kanto Elite Four member Lorelei Konna. The roar shifted pitch. Lorelei emerged from the blue tunnel in her own battle gear, white and blue, sharp lines, her glasses catching the sunlight. She carried herself with the kind of composure that made the 40,000 screaming spectators feel like background noise. They took their positions. The referee raised both flags. "This will be a full 6-on-6 battle. Substitutions are allowed. The match ends when all 6 of one trainer's Pokémon are unable to continue. Trainers, select your leads." Cynthia's hand went to her belt without hesitation. Lorelei mirrored the motion, equally decisive. 2 Pokeballs flew. Cynthia's burst of light resolved into Spiritomb. The ghost dark type materialized as a churning vortex of spectral faces bound to its keystone, its presence dropping the temperature around the field by several degrees. Lorelei's light became Jinx. The ice psychic type landed gracefully, her eyes gleaming with cold intelligence, frost already crystallizing in the air around her hands. The crowd went silent. Competitive battling at this level was different from anything most of them had ever seen. The air itself felt heavier, charged with the pressure of two trainers who'd spent years perfecting their craft. Begin. Lorelei struck first. Jinx, nasty plot into blizzard. 2 words. No wasted syllables. Jinx's eyes flared with dark psychic energy as she boosted her special attack, and in the same fluid motion, she thrust both hands forward. The temperature in the stadium plummeted. A wall of shrieking wind and ice erupted across the field, engulfing Spiritome's position in a wideout. Cynthia didn't flinch. Shadow sneak. Spiritome vanished. Not dodged, vanished, sinking into its own shadow the instant before the blizzard hit. The ice storm tore through empty space. Spiritome's shadow raced across the field like a living thing, emerging directly beneath Jinx and erupting upward with a strike that sent the ice-type stumbling backward. Ash's fingers tightened on the railing. The speed of it. Spiritome wasn't supposed to be fast, it was a defensive wall, a war of attrition Pokemon. But Cynthia had trained it to use Shadow Sneak as an evasion tool, not just an attack. She'd turned a weakness into a weapon. Lorelei adjusted instantly. Lovely kiss. Jinx recovered, spun, and blew a glittering kiss toward Spiritome. The sleep-inducing attack was fast, Ash could see the shimmer in the air as it closed the distance. Hypnosis, Cynthia countered. Spiritome's 100 faces opened their mouths simultaneously, and a wave of psychic somnolence rolled forward. The 2 sleep-inducing attacks collided midfield and detonated in a burst of purple and pink light that washed over both Pokemon. Neither fell asleep. But both staggered, disoriented by the feedback. Now, Cynthia said quietly. Dark Pulse. The attack came while Jinx was still shaking off the psychic interference. A concentrated beam of dark energy slammed into Jinx's center mass, and the ice-type crumpled. She tried to rise, ice forming around her fists, but her legs gave out. Jinx is unable to battle, the referee called. First blood to Cynthia, and the crowd erupted. Lorelei recalled Jinx without expression. She selected her next Pokeball with the same deliberate calm, and Ash realized something, she wasn't upset. She'd expected this. Jinx had been a probe, sent out to test Cynthia's lead, draw out Spiritome's defensive patterns, and gather data. Lorelei had sacrificed a Pokemon for information. Cold. Brilliant. Exactly what Ash would have expected from her. Cloister, Lorelei said, and her second Pokemon materialized, the massive bivalve fortress, its shell gleaming with an almost metallic sheen, spikes bristling. Shell Smash. Ash's breath caught. Shell Smash was a gamble, it dramatically boosted offensive stats while lowering defense. On a Pokemon like Cloister, which had the highest physical defense of almost any ice type, it was a calculated risk that could turn the tide of a battle in a single move. Cloister's shell cracked deliberately, shedding layers of defensive plating as raw offensive energy surged through its body. Icicle Spear, Lorelei commanded. 5 razor-sharp icicles launched from Cloister's shell in rapid succession, each one finding a different angle, each one screaming toward Spiritome with the speed of a rail gun. Shadow Sneak. Cynthia called, but she was a half-second too late. The first icicle caught Spiritome before it could sink into its shadow, shattering against its keystone with a crack that echoed across the stadium. The second and third followed, and Spiritome's spectral vortex flickered and dimmed. The fourth icicle hit empty space, Spiritome finally managed Shadow Sneak, disappearing into the ground. But the damage was done. When it re-emerged behind Cloister, its movements were sluggish, its faces grimacing in pain. Cynthia made a decision. Return. She recalled Spiritome. The crowd murmured, withdrawing your Pokemon before it fainted was a tactical choice that carried risk but preserved options. Cynthia was thinking ahead. She was always thinking ahead. Roserade, she said, and her grass poison type appeared in a burst of petals, its bouquet-like hands already glowing with toxic energy. Lorelei's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. Grass against ice, a type disadvantage for Cloister, but after Shell Smash, Cloyster was a glass cannon. One hit might end it, but one hit from Cloyster's boosted offense might end Roseraid first. Icicle spear, Lorelei said. Grass knot, Cynthia countered. Roseraid slammed one hand into the earth. Grass erupted from the field in a twisting knot directly beneath Cloyster, catching the heavy Pokemon and wrenching it upward. Grass knot dealt more damage to heavier opponents, and Cloyster, even with its shed shell, was one of the heaviest ice types in existence. Cloyster shrieked. Its icicle spear volley went wide, icicles punching into the arena walls as the grass knot crushed its now fragile body. Cloyster is unable to battle. The stadium was on its feet. This wasn't a battle, it was a conversation in violence, two geniuses speaking a language most people could only dimly comprehend. Ash understood every word. He watched Lorelei's face. Still no visible frustration, but something had shifted in the set of her jaw. She was down 2 Pokemon to 0. Against most opponents, that was a comfortable margin to work with. Against Cynthia, it was a crisis. Lorelei sent out Slowking. The psychic water type materialized with regal composure, its crown-like shelter gleaming. Trick Room, Lorelei said. Ash felt the air change. Psychic energy rippled outward from Slowking, warping the battlefield into a pocket dimension where speed was inverted, the slower Pokemon would now move first. It was a masterstroke. Roseraid was fast. Under Trick Room, its speed became a liability. Cynthia recognized the threat immediately. Return. Garchomp, go. The crowd lost its mind. Garchomp erupted onto the field with a roar that shook the stadium. The landshark dragon was enormous, its blade-like appendages gleaming, its eyes burning with the focused intensity of a predator who knew it was the most dangerous thing in the room. Cynthia's Garchomp was legendary, the single Pokemon most associated with her reign as champion. It had never been defeated in a recorded official match. But Garchomp was also fast. One of the fastest non-legendary Pokemon alive. Under Trick Room, that speed was a death sentence. Ice Beam, Lorelei said, and Ash heard something in her voice he hadn't before, satisfaction. She'd planned for this. She'd wanted Cynthia to bring out Garchomp under Trick Room. Slowking fired. The beam of freezing energy screamed across the field toward Garchomp. A 4-time super effective hit on a Dragon Ground type. If it connected, the match was effectively over. Cynthia's voice cut through the chaos. Dig. Garchomp dove. Not forward, not sideways, straight down, drilling into the compacted earth with a speed that seemed to defy the Trick Room's inversion. The ice beam scored a trench across the empty field. Trick Room inverts speed above ground, Ash muttered to himself, leaning forward. But Dig takes the Pokemon out of the battlefield temporarily. She's using the turns underground to wait out the Trick Room. Lance, who'd returned to the railing, gave him a look of genuine surprise. You caught that? Lorelei would have caught it too. And she had. Lorelei's lips pressed together, the first visible crack in her composure. Surf. Slowking raised its hands, and water flooded the arena. The field became a churning lake, water pouring into the hole Garchomp had created. You could dig, but you couldn't breathe underground forever. Garchomp burst from the earth like a breaching whale, water cascading off its body, and slammed into the flooded field. The Trick Room was still active. It was slower than Slowking. Ice Beam, Lorelei repeated. Flamethrower, Cynthia said. The attacks collided. Steam erupted across the battlefield, turning the arena into a sauna. Visibility dropped to 0. The crowd went silent, straining to see through the fog. When it cleared, both Pokemon were still standing. Garchomp was breathing hard, frost crystals forming along one wing where the ice beam had partially connected. Slowking was singed, its crown shelter smoking slightly. Then the Trick Room shattered. Its duration had expired. Cynthia smiled. Dragon Claw. Garchomp moved. At its natural speed, freed from Trick Room's inversion, it was almost invisible, a blue and gold blur that crossed the field in the space between heartbeats. Its claws ignited with draconic energy, and it struck Slowking with a blow that created a shockwave visible from the stands. Slowking didn't fly backward so much as it was removed from its position. It hit the arena wall, cracked the concrete, and slumped to the ground. Slowking is unable to battle. Lorelei was down 3-0. The crowd was chanting Cynthia's name. This should have been a foregone conclusion. Ash watched Lorelei's face. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When she opened them, something had changed. The careful control was still there, but beneath it, Ash saw something burning, not desperation, but refusal. The absolute, bone-deep refusal to lose. He recognized it. He'd felt it in himself 1,000 times. Lapras, Lorelei said. Her Lapras was different from any Ash had ever seen. It was massive, easily twice the size of an average specimen, and its shell bore scars from decades of champion-level battles. Its eyes were ancient and calm, and when it materialized, the water still flooding the arena began to freeze. Not quickly. Slowly, deliberately, the temperature dropping degree by degree. She's been saving it, Ash said. Lance nodded. Lorelei's Lapras has been her partner since she was 12. Whatever training data Cynthia has, that Lapras has faced things no data can prepare you for. Freeze-dry, Lorelei said. Ash had never seen freeze-dry executed at this level. Lapras opened its mouth, and the attack that emerged wasn't a beam or a blast, it was a wave. The moisture in the air, the water on the field, even the sweat on the faces of trainers in the front row, everything crystallized. The temperature in the stadium dropped 30 degrees in 2 seconds. The entire battlefield became a glacier. Garchomp roared. Ice was forming on its wings, its speed plummeting as the cold sapped its strength. 4 times weakness to ice. No amount of speed could overcome thermodynamics. Flamethrower. Cynthia called, and Garchomp responded, but the flame was weaker now, the cold leaching its fire. The flamethrower melted a path through the ice but dissipated before reaching Lapras. Sheer cold, Lorelei said. The stadium went silent. Sheer cold was an instant knockout move. Unreliable, inaccurate, a gamble that competitive battlers rarely risked. But Lorelei had spent 2 turns freezing the entire battlefield, dropping the temperature to a point where the thermodynamic gap between Lapras's attack and Garchomp's body was almost nothing. She'd engineered the conditions to make an unreliable move inevitable. The cold hit Garchomp like the hand of a god. Frost exploded across its body. Its roar cut short, ice sealing its jaw, and the land shark dragon crashed to the frozen field and didn't move. Garchomp is unable to battle. The silence lasted exactly 1 second. Then the stadium detonated. Ash's hands were shaking. Not from cold, from excitement. From the pure, intoxicating thrill of watching 2 trainers at the absolute peak of their craft tear into each other with everything they had. Cynthia recalled Garchomp. For the first time, her composure showed a crack, a tightening around her eyes, a slight exhale through her nose. Losing Garchomp stung. Ash could see it. But she wasn't beaten. The battle continued for another 40 minutes. Cynthia sent out Lucario, Roserade, then brought back Spiritomb. Lorelei cycled through Dugong and Piloswine before returning to Lapras. Each exchange was a masterclass in tactics, prediction, and adaptation. Lorelei clawed back the deficit with a discipline that was almost frightening, every move calculated, every sacrifice deliberate, every opening exploited with the precision of a scalpel. Cynthia fought like water, flowing around Lorelei's structures, finding the cracks, adapting in real time with an intuition that bordered on prescience. When Lorelei built a wall, Cynthia found a window. When Cynthia improvised a new angle, Lorelei had a contingency waiting. It came down to 2 Pokémon. Cynthia's Milotic against Lorelei's Lapras. Both were battered, exhausted, running on fumes and the sheer willpower of their trainers. The field was a wasteland of ice and scorched earth and standing water. Hydro pump, Cynthia said. Ice beam, Lorelei said. The attacks launched simultaneously. Milotic's torrent of pressurized water met Lapras's beam of freezing energy at the exact center of the field, and the collision point became a detonation. Ice and water exploded outward. The shockwave hit both Pokémon, hit both trainers, hit the front row of the stadium. When the mist cleared, both Pokémon were down. Both Pokémon are unable to battle. This match is a draw. The stadium erupted into noise that was less cheering and more a collective expression of awe. Ash was gripping the railing hard enough to leave marks, and he was grinning, a wide, unguarded, pure grin that he couldn't have suppressed if he'd tried. Down on the field, Cynthia and Lorelei stood in the ruins of the battlefield. They were both breathing hard, both showing the strain of 60 minutes of the highest level battling either had engaged in for years. They looked at each other across the devastation. Cynthia extended her hand. Lorelei looked at it for a long moment. Then she crossed the field, her boots crunching on ice, and shook it. Their grip held for exactly 2 seconds longer than a professional handshake. Neither of them smiled. But something passed between them, an acknowledgement that what they just shared was rarer than championships, rarer than titles. Two equals, fully tested. The post-match debrief in the assembly chamber was barely controlled pandemonium. Goodshow had the gavel working overtime. Regional representatives argued about protocol. Lance was in heated debate with Karen about whether the draw should trigger a rematch. Stephen Stone had produced a laptop from somewhere and was running statistical analysis on the battle with the kind of intensity usually reserved for archaeological discoveries. Ash sat in his chair and watched it all with Pikachu curled in his lap. He'd been quiet since the match ended, turning something over in his mind with the slow, deliberate focus he usually reserved for solving a battle puzzle. Goodshow finally restored order. Given the draw, the association will need to reconvene to determine the mentorship assignment. We can schedule a rematch for, no. Ash's voice wasn't loud. He didn't stand up, didn't raise his hand, didn't ask for the floor. He just spoke, and the room went quiet. Pikachu's ears perked up. Goodshow blinked. Mr. Ketchum. Ash stood now. He looked at Cynthia, who had returned to her front row seat and was watching him with undisguised curiosity. He looked at Lorelei, who had her portfolio open but wasn't reading it, her pen frozen mid-notation. I watched that battle, Ash said. Every second of it. And what I saw was two completely different philosophies pushed to their absolute limit, and neither one broke. Neither one was wrong. He paused. Cynthia battles by reading the soul of the fight. Lorelei battles by mastering the science of it. I need both. Murmurs rippled through the room. With respect, Mr. Ketchum, a PWA delegate from Hoenn interjected, the traditional mentorship model, I'm not interested in traditional. Ash's voice didn't change pitch or volume, but the edge in it silenced the delegate mid-sentence. I've been doing this for 9 years. I've challenged every region, fought every type of trainer, made every kind of mistake. I know what I'm missing, and it's not one thing. I need to learn to trust my instincts and build tactical depth. I need Cynthia's intuition and Lorelei's structure. He looked between the two women. I'm asking both of you. Not as a compromise. Not because I can't choose. Because choosing one would be choosing to be half the trainer I could be. The room held its breath. Cynthia leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and studied Ash with an expression that was equal parts impressed and amused. He's not wrong. Every head turned to Lorelei. She'd removed her glasses and was cleaning them, and Ash noticed her hands were perfectly steady. She replaced the glasses, looked directly at him, and for the first time, something approximating a smile crossed her face. He's certainly bold, she said. Which is either a strength or a fatal flaw, depending on whether he can back it up. I can, Ash said. That remains to be seen. Lorelei closed her portfolio. But I accept. On the condition that we establish a structured training schedule with clear benchmarks. I won't waste my time on someone who isn't willing to be measured. Cynthia's smile widened. And I accept on the condition that we don't strangle his instincts with too much structure. She gave Lorelei a look that was friendly on the surface and competitive underneath. We'll need a neutral training site. Somewhere away from league politics. Lorelei nodded. Savault Island. I have access to a research facility there. Isolated, well-equipped, multiple terrain types. I know the one, Cynthia said. The old ranger station. Converted. It has everything we'd need. Ash looked between them, feeling the energy shift. They'd gone from competing for the right to mentor him to cooperating on logistics in under 2 minutes. Whatever else they disagreed about, they were both professionals. How soon can we start? He asked. Lorelei stood. I can be ready to depart tomorrow. Cynthia rose as well. As can I. Goodshow looked like a man who'd lost control of his own meeting and was trying to decide whether to be upset about it. He settled for clearing his throat. Well. If all parties are in agreement, the association will sanction a dual mentorship arrangement for Mr. Ketchum's tournament preparation. The details will be formalized by end of, but Ash, Cynthia, and Lorelei had already turned away from the podium and were walking toward the chamber's exit, Pikachu trotting at Ash's heels. They were in conversation, Lorelei outlining the facility's capabilities while Cynthia asked about terrain training options, and the bureaucratic machinery of the PWA had become irrelevant. Lance watched them go with a crooked smile and muttered to no one in particular, that kid's going to change everything. The boat to Savault Island departed from Vermilion City at dawn, cutting through morning fog that clung to the harbor like gray silk. It was a modest vessel, a converted research transport with a reinforced hull and enough deck space for Pokémon to stretch their legs. Ash had spent most of the journey so far at the bow, watching the Sevii Islands materialize on the horizon like the spine of some enormous sleeping creature. Pikachu was in his usual spot, shoulder, leaning into the wind, ears streaming back. They'd been sailing for 3 hours when Cynthia appeared at the railing beside him. She'd changed out of her battle attire into something more casual, gray slacks, a loose black sweater with the sleeves pushed up, her hair down. She looked, Ash thought, like a completely different person from the champion who'd brought down Slowking with a dragon claw that cracked concrete. Softer. More real. You're a morning person, she observed. Habit. When you travel as much as I have, you learn to get up with the sun or miss the good stuff. The good stuff? Yeah. He gestured at the horizon, where the fog was burning off in streaks of gold and amber. This. Cynthia followed his gaze. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the world brighten. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Yesterday, when you stood up and told the entire PWA that you wanted both of us as mentors, were you nervous? Ash considered the question honestly. No. Not even a little. I've faced down legendary Pokémon that could reshape reality. A room full of league officials isn't going to make me nervous. He paused. That sounds arrogant, doesn't it? It sounds honest. Cynthia leaned on the railing, and the morning light caught her profile in a way that made her look like one of the ancient carvings in Celestic Town. Honesty is rare in the world I operate in. Refreshing, but rare. Is that why you volunteered to mentor me? Because I'm honest? Partly. She turned to look at him, and her gray eyes were warm in a way that made Ash's chest do something unexpected. I also think you're the most talented trainer of your generation, and I want to see what you become when you stop holding back. I don't hold back. You do. You just don't realize it yet. She smiled. That's what I'm here for. Ash held her gaze. There was something in the space between them, a charge, an unspoken current, that he could feel but couldn't name. Or maybe he could name it but wasn't ready to. "Thank you," he said. "For agreeing to this. I know it's unconventional. I've built my career on unconventional, Ash. You're in good company." Pikachu chirped something that was probably commentary on the moment, and Cynthia laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that Ash decided was one of the best sounds he'd ever heard. He glanced toward the ship's interior and saw Lorelei through the porthole of the main cabin. She was seated at a small table, surrounded by papers and screens, her hair tucked behind one ear, reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a pen in one hand and a cup of tea in the other, and she was deep enough in her work that the rest of the world had clearly ceased to exist. But as Ash watched, she looked up. Through the glass, their eyes met. Lorelei held his gaze for 1 beat, 2 beats, 3, and then she glanced down at her work again, but not before something flickered across her face. A softening. A crack in the permafrost. "She does that," Cynthia murmured. Ash looked at her. "Does what?" "Watches. Calculates. Files things away for later." There was no malice in Cynthia's voice, if anything, there was a grudging admiration. "She's already building a tactical profile of you in her head. How you stand, how you breathe, what you look at when you think no one's watching. Sounds intense. That's one word for it." Cynthia's smile turned enigmatic. "She's also trying to figure out why she can't stop looking." Ash blinked. "What?" "Nothing." Cynthia pushed off the railing. "I'm going to feed my team. Join me?" Ash nodded and followed, and the moment, whatever it had been, dissolved into the salt air. The converted research facility on Savolt Island sat on a bluff overlooking the southern shore, surrounded by dense tropical forest on 3 sides and a rocky coastline on the 4th. It had the utilitarian charm of a building that had been designed for function and then grudgingly made habitable, concrete walls softened with wood paneling, industrial lighting replaced by warmer fixtures, a cafeteria that someone had optimistically stocked with actual food instead of field rations. There were training fields behind the main building, 3 of them, each configured for different terrain types. Beyond those, the island's natural landscape offered everything from volcanic rock formations to underground cave systems to open ocean. A perfect training ground. Ash dropped his bag in the room he'd been assigned, small, clean, with a window overlooking the ocean, and was back outside in 5 minutes. Pikachu didn't even bother dismounting from his shoulder. He found Cynthia already on the beach training field, her Garchomp beside her. The dragon was stretching, its massive form casting a shadow across the sand like a sundial. Cynthia was barefoot, her pants rolled up, moving through what Ash recognized as a Sinnoh meditation form, slow, fluid motions that mirrored the way her Pokémon moved in battle. "You train barefoot?" Ash asked, approaching. "I train connected to the ground." She finished a movement and opened her eyes. "Your Pokémon feel the battlefield through their bodies. If you want to understand what they feel, you need to feel it too." She gestured at his boots. "Off." Ash pulled off his boots. The sand was warm, and he could feel the grain of it, the subtle vibrations of the waves, the distant thrum of ground-type energy that Savolt Island's volcanic foundation produced. "Oh," he said. Cynthia watched his face. "You feel it? The ground's alive. Everything is alive, Ash. The battlefield is alive. The air between you and your opponent is alive. The space between a command and its execution, alive." She called Garchomp over, and the dragon padded across the sand with surprising gentleness. "I want you to battle me. Right now. But I want you to do it without speaking. Without, no commands. No call-outs. Just you and your Pokémon, communicating through the bond." She met his eyes. "You said yesterday that you need to learn to trust your instincts. So let's find out how deep those instincts go. Choose your partner." Ash didn't hesitate. He reached for a pokeball, and Pikachu hopped down from his shoulder, understanding instantly. But Ash shook his head. Pikachu was too synced with him. The exercise needed to challenge him. He released Lucario. The Aura Pokemon materialized on the sand, immediately dropping into a ready stance. Lucario's red eyes found Ash, and something passed between them, a pulse of aura energy, a wordless question. Ready? Ash nodded. Begin, Cynthia said, and Garchomp lunged. The first 30 seconds were chaos. Without verbal commands, Ash had to rely entirely on the aura bond with Lucario, projecting intent, emotion, and tactical direction through a channel that was intuitive but imprecise. Lucario read his surface intentions well enough to dodge Garchomp's initial Dragon Claw, but the counterattack was a half-second slow, and Garchomp punished the delay with a sandstorm that blinded them both. Ash gritted his teeth. He was trying to form commands in his head and project them, essentially shouting silently, and it wasn't working. The translation from thought to aura was lossy, degraded, like trying to play music through a broken speaker. Cynthia's Garchomp pressed the advantage. Earthquake. The ground heaved. Lucario stumbled. Ash felt the tremor through his bare feet and instinctively shifted his weight. And something clicked. He stopped trying to send commands. Instead, he felt. He felt the sand under his feet, the vibrations of Garchomp's movement, the heat of Lucario's fighting spirit, the cool salt air. He let himself be part of the battlefield instead of standing outside it, and his aura responded, not with words, but with emotion. Confidence. Direction. Trust. Lucario felt it. The Pokemon's eyes flared blue, and suddenly it was moving with a fluidity it hadn't shown before. It dodged Garchomp's follow-up brick break not by anticipating the attack but by feeling the shift in the dragon's weight through the ground. It countered with an aura sphere that materialized faster than Ash had ever seen, not because it was more powerful, but because there was no lag between Ash's intent and Lucario's action. The bond was clean. Pure signal, no noise. Cynthia watched with widening eyes. She'd expected this exercise to take days. Ash had found the wavelength in minutes. The spar continued for another 10 minutes. Ash couldn't beat Cynthia's Garchomp, the gap in raw power was still enormous, but by the end, Lucario was matching the dragon's speed, reading its movements through the ground, and landing hits that Garchomp had to actually work to avoid. Stop, Cynthia said. They stopped. Lucario was panting. Ash was breathing hard, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. But he was grinning. That was, he started. Extraordinary, Cynthia finished. She walked toward him, and her expression was something Ash had never seen on the face of a champion before, genuine wonder. I've trained students who took months to achieve silent communication at that level. You did it in minutes. It's not that different from what I already do with Pikachu. I just, never tried extending it. Because no one ever asked you to. Cynthia stopped in front of him. Close. Close enough that he could see the flecks of silver in her gray eyes. That's what I'm here for. To ask you the questions no one else thinks to ask. A slow clap came from the treeline. They turned. Lorelei was standing at the edge of the beach, arms crossed, her portfolio nowhere in sight for once. She'd changed into field clothes, fitted slacks, a blue button-down with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, practical boots. She looked like a different person from the Ice Queen who dissected Ash's battle footage in front of 60 people. Impressive, she said, and she meant it. Ash could hear it in her voice, the genuine respect underneath the clinical assessment. Your aura sensitivity is well above baseline. But silent communication won't save you against an opponent who's prepared for it. Meaning? Ash asked. Lorelei walked onto the sand. Meaning that what Cynthia just tested was your ability to communicate with your own Pokemon. I'm more interested in your ability to communicate with your opponents. I don't follow. Lorelei stopped a few feet away. She removed her glasses, folded them carefully, and tucked them into her breast pocket. Her eyes, unobscured, were a pale blue that reminded Ash of glacial ice, beautiful and sharp enough to cut. Every Pokémon telegraphs its next move before it executes. A shift in weight, a change in breathing pattern, a micro-expression. If you can read your own Lucario's intent through aura, you should theoretically be able to read an enemy Pokémon's intent through observation. She raised an eyebrow. You have the raw ability. What you lack is the analytical framework to process what you're seeing in real time. And you can teach me that. I can teach you to see patterns that would take you years to discover on your own. She glanced at Cynthia. If the champion has no objections to sharing the training field. Cynthia's smile was gracious and competitive in equal measure. By all means. Lorelei nodded and pulled a pokeball from her belt. Dugong, stand by. Her dugong materialized, sleek, white, its horn gleaming. It was smaller than her Lapras but moved with the same controlled grace. I'm going to have Dugong execute a series of attacks, Lorelei said to Ash. I want you to predict each one before it lands. Not through aura, through observation. Watch its body. Watch its breathing. Watch the temperature around it. She paused. And don't you dare close your eyes. This isn't mysticism. This is science. Ash almost laughed. The contrast between Cynthia's approach, feel the battlefield, trust your instincts, and Lorelei's, observe, analyze, predict, was so stark it should have been contradictory. But standing on that beach, barefoot, his aura still humming from the exercise with Lucario, Ash could feel how they fit together. Instinct told you something was coming. Analysis told you what. Let's go, he said. Lorelei gave a command, and Dugong attacked. Ash watched. The first three moves, he read wrong: Ice Beam, Aurora Beam, and Aqua Tail blurred together in a sequence he couldn't untangle. Lorelei didn't criticize. She simply said, again, and ran the sequence once more. On the second pass, Ash caught the difference between Dugong's Ice Beam posture and its Aurora Beam stance, a slight tilt of the horn, a contraction in the neck muscles. On the third pass, he predicted Ice Beam correctly before it launched. By the 10th pass, he was reading all three moves with 80% accuracy. Lorelei had stopped giving new commands and was just watching him, watching the way his eyes moved, the way his body shifted, the way he processed information. Enough, she said after 20 minutes. Dugong relaxed and slid into the shallows to cool off. Lorelei looked at Ash with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your visual processing speed is significantly above what I expected. Is that your way of saying I did good? It's my way of saying you're not a waste of my time. But the corner of her mouth twitched. We have a great deal of work to do. Your pattern recognition is raw and undisciplined. But the foundation is there. She put her glasses back on. I'll have a full training schedule drafted by tonight. We start at dawn. Cynthia already claimed dawn for intuition training, Ash said. Then we train at dawn as well. Lorelei gave Cynthia a look that was pure ice. I'm sure the champion won't mind sharing. Cynthia returned the look with perfect warmth. Of course not. Competition breeds excellence, after all. The air between them crackled. Ash stood in the middle of it, and something about the situation, two extraordinary women, both brilliant, both fierce, both looking at him like he was the most interesting problem they'd encountered in years, made him feel simultaneously invigorated and slightly terrified. Great, he said. Dawn it is. Both of you. At the same time. He walked past them toward the facility, Pikachu on his shoulder, and he didn't see the glance that Cynthia and Lorelei exchanged behind his back, a glance that was part challenge, part curiosity, and part something neither of them was ready to name. Late that night, Ash couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed in the small facility room, staring at the ceiling, running through the day's training in his mind. Pikachu was curled at his feet, snoring softly. The window was open, and the sound of waves on the rocky shore below filled the room with a rhythm that should have been soothing. His mind wouldn't settle. Not because of anxiety, because of excitement. The silent communication exercise with Cynthia had opened a door he hadn't known existed. Lorelei's observation training had given him a new way to see the world. For the first time in years, Ash felt like he was genuinely learning, not just accumulating experience but fundamentally expanding what he was capable of. He got up, pulled on a shirt and his boots, and left the room. The facility was quiet. Most of the support staff, a small team of researchers and a Pokémon Center nurse Lorelei had arranged, were asleep. The hallways were lit by emergency strips that cast everything in a blue glow. Ash found his way to the common room, a large open space with couches, a kitchenette, and a wall of windows overlooking the ocean. He was going to make tea. He was going to sit and think. Lorelei was already there. She was sitting on one of the couches with her legs tucked beneath her, a mug of something steaming on the side table, her reading glasses on, poring over a thick notebook filled with handwritten notes. Her hair was loose, Ash realized he'd never seen it unrestrained before, and she was wearing simple pajamas, a soft blue top and dark bottoms, looking more human and less elite than he'd ever seen her. She looked up when he entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Can't sleep either?" Ash asked. "I rarely sleep well in new places." She closed the notebook but didn't hide it, a gesture of trust that Ash suspected was unusual for her. "Tea's in the pot. Green. I made extra." Ash poured himself a cup and sat on the couch opposite her. The ocean was silver under a half moon, the waves catching and losing the light in a slow rhythm. "What were you working on?" he asked. "Your training schedule. And a comparative analysis of your battle history with the confirmed tournament entrants." She sipped her tea. "You have favorable matchup profiles against most of them. Lance's dragon-heavy roster is vulnerable to your Pikachu's ice tail if you can get the timing right. Steven's steel types give you trouble, but your Charizard's raw power should compensate. And you?" Lorelei paused. "What about me? If we end up facing each other in the tournament, what's my matchup profile against you?" She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "Unfavorable." "How unfavorable?" "Significantly." She set her mug down. "My team is designed to control tempo and suffocate aggressive strategies. Your natural battle style is aggressive. You'd play directly into my strengths. So teach me how to beat you." Lorelei's eyebrows rose. "You want me to teach you my own weaknesses? You said you'd teach me to win against anyone. Does anyone not include you?" Something shifted in her expression. The analytical distance softened, and what replaced it was, surprised. Amused? Ash wasn't sure. But she held his gaze, and for the first time, the Ice Queen of Kanto looked at him not as a student or a project but as a person who just said something that genuinely caught her off guard. "You're serious," she said. "Always." Lorelei was quiet for a long moment. The waves filled the silence. Then she reached for her notebook, opened it to a fresh page, and clicked her pen. "My Lapras is my anchor," she said. "Everything I do revolves around getting Lapras into a winning position. If you can identify the setup and disrupt it before the third turn of any sequence, you collapse my entire strategy." She began writing. "Here. These are the 3 most common patterns I use to establish Lapras's field control." Ash leaned forward, reading her handwriting upside down. "You're actually doing it. You're giving me the playbook." "You asked." She kept writing. "And you're not wrong. If I'm going to be your mentor, I need to commit fully. Even if it means equipping you to defeat me." She looked up. "Besides, if you can beat me using my own tactics, it means I taught you well. That's worth more than any trophy." Ash studied her face. In the blue half-light of the common room, with her glasses slightly crooked and her hair falling across her shoulder, Lorelei looked nothing like the untouchable ice queen of her reputation. She looked like a woman who cared deeply about her craft and was choosing, for reasons she probably hadn't fully examined, to share it with someone she'd known for less than 48 hours. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why did you volunteer to mentor me?" "The real reason. Not the speech you gave in the chamber." Lorelei's pen stopped. She stared at the page, then set the pen down carefully. "Because I had a student once," she said. "Years ago. He was brilliant, more naturally gifted than anyone I'd ever trained. I gave him everything I had. Every tactic, every insight, every piece of myself that I could translate into competitive knowledge." She paused. "He took what I taught him and he left. Not just the training, he left the league entirely. Disappeared. I heard rumors for a while. Then nothing." Ash waited. "You remind me of him, in some ways. The raw talent, the intensity, the refusal to be contained by conventional thinking." She met his eyes. "But you're different in one critical way." "What way?" He was angry. "Underneath everything, there was a rage that I couldn't reach and couldn't redirect." "You're not angry, Ash. You're bright. Clear. Like a lens." She adjusted her glasses. "I volunteered because I want to get it right this time. I want to mentor someone whose light I help focus, not someone whose fire I accidentally feed." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and unguarded in a way that Ash suspected Lorelei almost never allowed herself to be. "Thank you for telling me that," he said. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't." They sat together for a while after that, drinking tea and reviewing the notebook. Ash asked questions, sharp, incisive questions that demonstrated the analytical mind Lorelei had identified in the chamber, and Lorelei answered them with increasing candor. They argued about tempo control. They disagreed about the value of prediction versus reaction. They found common ground on the importance of understanding type matchups at an energetic level rather than a categorical one. At some point, Ash realized they'd been talking for 2 hours. The tea was cold. The moon had moved across the sky. And Lorelei was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen from an Elite Four member before, open, engaged, and just slightly off balance, as if he'd shifted something in her that she hadn't expected to move. "It's late," she said. "Yeah." Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Lorelei stood, gathered her notebook and mug, and walked toward the door. She paused in the frame. "Ash." "Yeah. You asked me to teach you my weaknesses. I need you to understand something about that request." She didn't turn around. "There are tactical weaknesses, and there are personal ones. I've spent my career making sure no one can tell the difference. You." She hesitated. "You make them harder to hide." She left. Ash sat in the empty common room for a long time, listening to the waves. Pikachu, who had apparently followed him and been sitting on the windowsill the entire time like a furry surveillance system, hopped down and climbed into his lap. "Pika Pika. I don't know, buddy. I really don't know." But that wasn't entirely true. He was beginning to know. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud. The next morning broke clear and warm, and Ash was on the beach before the sun fully crested the horizon. Pikachu rode his shoulder, still sleepy, munching on a berry from the facility kitchen. He'd released his team, all of them. Pikachu, Charizard, Lucario, Greninja, Sceptile, and Gengar. They spread across the sand in various states of readiness. Charizard was already doing aerial stretches, its massive wings catching the dawn light. Greninja stood at the waterline, perfectly still, its tongue scarf rippling in the breeze. Sceptile had found a warm rock and was soaking up the early sun with its seeds. Gengar was lurking in Charizard's shadow, because Gengar thought that was hilarious. Ash stood among them and felt, for a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through together. Every badge, every loss, every victory that felt impossible until it happened. These 6 Pokémon represented the best of who he was. Whatever the Grand Masters tournament brought, they'd face it the way they faced everything, together. Morning, he said to them. We're here to get stronger. All of us. There are trainers in this tournament who've been at the top for a decade, and they're going to test us in ways we haven't been tested before. But that's what we want, right? The challenge. The chance to prove that our bond. He paused, thinking of Cynthia's exercise, the silent communication, the aura flowing clean and pure. Our bond is real. Not just real. Unbeatable. Charizard roared. Lucario's aura flared. Pikachu's cheek sparked. Greninja shifted into battle stance without being asked. Sceptile seeds began to glow. Gengar cackled. Ash grinned. Let's get to work. He was mid-drill with Sceptile, working on the timing of Leaf Blade's follow-through, when he felt 2 presences arrive at the tree line simultaneously. He didn't need to look. He could feel them, one warm and flowing like sunlight through water, the other cool and precise like the edge of a blade. Cynthia and Lorelei stepped onto the beach at the same time, from different paths, and came to a stop with Ash equidistant between them. For a moment, the 3 of them stood in a triangle on the dawnlit sand, the ocean at their backs, the island's volcanic heart humming beneath their feet. Ready? Ash asked. The question, Cynthia said, releasing Garchomp with a smile that was equal parts warmth and challenge, is whether you are. Less talking, Lorelei said, releasing Lapras into the shallows without ceremony. More working. Ash looked between them, the Sinnoh champion and the Kanto Ice Queen, 2 of the most formidable trainers alive, standing on a beach at dawn because they believed in what he could become, and felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty. Something more dangerous. Hope. Then let's begin, he said, and the training started in earnest as the sun rose over the ocean, painting the world in gold and turning the waves into sheets of hammered light, and the 3 of them stepped forward into whatever came next without looking back. Somewhere, far to the north, in ruins that had stood silent for 1,000 years, stone cracked and ancient light bled through the fractures. A man knelt in the glow, his hands pressed flat against a tablet carved with symbols older than any language. His eyes were closed. His face was wet. The fragment of origin pulsed once in the darkness, and the bond between the world of humans and the world of Pokémon trembled. It wouldn't be the last time. Chapter 2, Trial by Fire. 3 weeks into training, Ash broke Lorelei's analytical model. Not her spirit, not her patience, her actual predictive model. The mathematical framework she'd spent the better part of a decade constructing to forecast battle outcomes based on trainer behavior patterns. She'd fed every data point from Ash's training sessions into the algorithm, and on the morning of the 22nd day, the model returned an error she'd never seen before: insufficient pattern coherence for predictive mapping. In plain language, Ash Ketchum didn't repeat himself enough for math to keep up with him. Lorelei sat at the strategy room table, staring at her screen, and said a word that would have scandalized the Kanto League's PR department. Cynthia, who was passing through the corridor with 2 mugs of coffee, stuck her head in. Problem? Your protégé just broke my model. Our protégé. Cynthia set one of the mugs on the table beside Lorelei. And that's not a problem. That's a feature. Lorelei picked up the coffee, sipped it, and didn't comment on the fact that Cynthia had added exactly the right amount of cream. They'd been living in the same facility for 3 weeks, and certain things had become routine without either of them acknowledging the shift. Cynthia made coffee every morning, always 2 mugs extra, one for Lorelei, one for Ash, prepared exactly to preference. Lorelei had started leaving her strategy notes accessible on the shared terminal, which for a woman who'd once encrypted her grocery lists was practically an act of emotional nudity. The model isn't wrong, Lorelei said, pulling up the data visualization. He genuinely doesn't have consistent tactical patterns. Every battle he fights is structurally unique. Even his fallback instincts shift based on, I'm not sure what. Mood? Atmospheric pressure? The alignment of the stars? Emotional state, Cynthia said, leaning against the doorframe. His battling changes based on his emotional connection to the moment. When he's calm, he's methodical. When he's excited, he's explosive. When he's protective, when his Pokémon are in danger, he becomes something else entirely. Lorelei considered this. That's not trainable. No. But it is refinable. Cynthia took a long drink of her own coffee. Stop trying to model him. Start trying to understand him. Understanding requires data. Understanding requires presence, Lorelei. You can't know someone through spreadsheets. They looked at each other for a moment, the kind of loaded silence that had become increasingly common between them over the past 3 weeks. Not hostile. Not quite comfortable either. Something in the space between respect and rivalry, complicated by the fact that they were both spending hours every day in close quarters with a young man who had a talent for making powerful women feel things they hadn't scheduled. I'll take that under advisement, Lorelei said, and turned back to her screen. Cynthia smiled into her coffee and left. The morning session started at 6, which Ash had come to think of as Cynthia time. They trained on the beach in the dawn light, always barefoot, always with an emphasis on connection over technique. Over 3 weeks, the exercises had evolved from silent communication drills to something Cynthia called empathic battling, fighting while maintaining a conscious awareness of both your Pokémon's emotional state and your opponent's. Today's exercise was new. Cynthia stood across the sand from Ash with Togekiss hovering at her shoulder, and she'd asked him to bring out Greninja. The bond you have with Greninja is unique, she said. The battle bond phenomenon, your hearts synchronizing, your bodies moving as one. Most researchers treat it as a curiosity. I think it's the purest expression of what the trainer-Pokémon relationship can be. Ash looked at Greninja. The water type met his gaze with those calm, focused eyes, and Ash felt the familiar pulse between them, a frequency only they shared. What do you want me to do with it? Ash asked. I want you to hold the bond form for as long as possible without engaging in combat. That's, Ash stopped. Battle bond activated through the intensity of combat. The adrenaline, the focus, the shared will to win. Holding it passively was like trying to keep a flame burning without fuel. I don't know if that's possible. 3 weeks ago, you didn't know silent communication was possible either. Cynthia's eyes were warm but unyielding. The bond activates through battle because that's the only context you've ever used it in. But the connection between you and Greninja isn't about fighting. It's about trust. About two beings choosing to become one. She paused. Find the feeling beneath the battle. The real feeling. And hold it. Ash closed his eyes. Greninja closed its eyes at the same moment, perfectly synchronized, perfectly attuned. The air between them shimmered. He searched for the feeling. Not the rush of combat, not the thrill of the fight. Deeper. The moment he'd met Greninja as a Froakie, a stubborn, proud little Pokémon that had chosen him out of every trainer it could have had. The journey they'd shared. The losses. The victories that wouldn't have happened without each other. The wordless understanding that they were, in some fundamental way, the same. Blue light erupted around Greninja. The water veil formed, reshaping, extending, the giant water shuriken materialized on its back, its body shifting into the battle bond form. Ash felt the merge hit him like a wave of warm water, and for a moment he was Greninja, feeling the sand through webbed feet, tasting salt on the air, sensing the world through a body that was faster and more fluid than any human could be. He held it. The light stabilized. Greninja stood in full bond form, and neither of them was fighting anything. Cynthia's breath caught. How long? Ash asked, his voice slightly strained with concentration. You've been holding it for 30 seconds. 30 seconds became a minute. A minute became 2. Ash felt the strain, not physical, emotional. The bond demanded intensity, and without the external pressure of combat, he had to generate that intensity internally. It was like holding a musical note at perfect pitch without accompaniment. At 3 minutes and 12 seconds, the form flickered and collapsed. Greninja staggered, and Ash dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Pikachu chirped anxiously from the sideline. 3 minutes, Cynthia said. The previous recorded maximum for sustained battle bond without combat stimulus was 6 seconds. Ash looked up at her, sweat dripping from his jaw. That's all. You just broke a record by a factor of 30, and you're disappointed? I can do better. Cynthia stared at him. Then she laughed, not the polished, controlled laugh she used in public, but something raw and delighted. You are going to be terrifying at the tournament. She offered him her hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet. The momentum brought them close enough that he could smell the faint lavender scent she wore, close enough that he could count the individual silver flecks in her gray eyes. Cynthia didn't step back. Neither did he. You know, she said quietly, most people in my position would be worried about creating a student who could surpass them. Are you? No. Her hand was still holding his, their fingers interlocked. I'm excited. The moment stretched. Ash became acutely aware of the warmth of her palm, the steady pulse he could feel through her skin, the way she was looking at him, not as a champion looks at a student, but as a woman looks at someone who makes the ground feel different under her feet. Cynthia, don't. She squeezed his hand once, gently. Don't name it yet. Just let it be. She released his hand, stepped back, and composed herself with a skill born of years in the public eye. But her cheeks were flushed, and Ash filed that away, not in an analytical framework like Lorelei would have, but in the quiet place where he kept things that mattered. The evening sessions belonged to Lorelei. They worked in the strategy room after dinner, usually until midnight, sometimes later. The format had evolved over 3 weeks from structured lectures into something more like intellectual sparring, Lorelei presenting tactical scenarios, Ash solving them, then both of them arguing about whether his solution was brilliant or insane. The answer, increasingly, was both. Tonight, Lorelei had set up a holographic battle simulator, a luxury piece of PWA equipment she'd requisitioned with the kind of bureaucratic ruthlessness that suggested she knew where several league officials' skeletons were buried. The scenario is this, she said, pulling up the display. A simulated battlefield appeared between them, holographic Pokémon rendered in blue light. You're in the semifinals of the Grand Masters tournament. Your opponent is Lance. He leads with Dragonite. You've already lost 2 Pokémon. He's lost 1. His remaining 5 include 3 dragons and 2 flyers. Your remaining 4 are Pikachu, Charizard, Sceptile, and Gengar. Ash studied the display, chin in his hand. What's the field? Standard neutral. No terrain advantages. Weather? Clear. No active weather effects. And Lance's Dragonite, which one? The physical sweeper or the mixed attacker? Lorelei's eyebrow rose. You've catalogued his team individually? I've fought Lance 3 times. Lost twice, won once. You don't forget a Dragonite that can Thunder Punch and Hyper Beam in the same sequence. Ash traced patterns on the holographic field. If it's the physical sweeper, I lead Gengar. Immunity to most of its moveset, and I can burn it with Will-O-Wisp to cripple its attack. If it's the mixed attacker, I lead Pikachu. Speed advantage, Iron Tail for coverage, and Pikachu can take a hit if I misread the opening. It's the mixed attacker. Ash nodded. Pikachu leads. Turn 1, I feint with Thunderbolt to bait Dragonite into multi-scale activation. Multi-scale was already broken. Your second Pokémon landed a hit before it went down. Even better. Pikachu opens Iron Tail. Even if Dragonite outspeeds, it does. Pikachu has Endure in reserve. I take the first hit, survive with 1 HP, and counter with Iron Tail. The damage output should, he ran numbers in his head. 40%. Maybe 45 with a crit. 37, Lorelei corrected. Lance's Dragonite runs a defensive EV spread that most people don't account for. He sacrifices speed for bulk precisely because his opponents always expect the standard offensive build. Ash paused, recalculating. Then I don't endure. I switch into Jengar on the predicted Dragon Rush, take the normal type immunity on a potential Hyper Beam, and Destiny Bond. You'd sacrifice Jengar to take out Lance's Dragonite? In a heartbeat. That leaves him with 4 Pokemon against my 3, but his biggest threat is off the board. From there, I can outmaneuver the rest with Charizard and Sceptile. Lorelei ran the simulation. The holographic Pokemon moved through the scenario, and Ash watched the probability calculation scroll past. Win rate, 64%. Not bad for a trainer who never graduated from a formal academy, Lorelei murmured. I graduated from the school of getting my ass kicked across 6 regions. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. Run it again. This time, Lance reads your Jengar switch and goes Earthquake instead of Dragon Rush. They ran it again. And again. And again. Each time, Lorelei introduced a new variable, a different move, a different switch, a different read, and each time, Ash adapted. His solutions weren't always optimal, but they were always functional, and they carried a creativity that the simulation's probability engine couldn't fully account for. After 2 hours, Lorelei shut down the simulator and leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses to rub her eyes. It was a gesture of fatigue she would never have shown in public, and Ash understood the trust it represented. You have a problem, she said. Just one. A specific one. She replaced her glasses. You're excellent at reactive strategy. Someone presents a threat, and you solve it. But you almost never create the threat. You wait for your opponent to establish the terms of engagement, and then you adapt. Ash frowned. That's how I've always fought. I know. And it works against 95% of trainers. But against the top 5%, against Cynthia, against me, against Kieran, she stopped. Ash caught it. Against who? Lorelei's expression closed like a door. The warmth that had been building over 2 hours of intellectual sparring froze over, and for a moment she was the Ice Queen again, untouchable and remote. Against top-tier opponents, she corrected smoothly. Reactive strategy means you're always playing their game. You need to learn to dictate tempo. To make your opponent react to you. Ash let the name drop go. For now. How do I learn that? By fighting someone who can punish reactive play until you stop relying on it. She stood. Tomorrow. Full battle. You and me, no restrictions, no analysis, no teaching moments. I'm going to fight you like I'd fight in the tournament, and you're going to learn what it feels like when someone better than you controls every second of the match. Someone better than me? Yes. There was no arrogance in her voice, just fact. For now. That's the whole point. They looked at each other across the table, the deactivated simulator casting faint blue shadows across both their faces. The facility was quiet. The ocean murmured beyond the walls. Ash could feel something in the air between them, not the warm, flowing connection he felt with Cynthia, but something sharper, more electric. A tension that had edges. Lorelei. What? The name you almost said. Kieran. Who is that? The silence that followed was so complete Ash could hear Pikachu snoring in the next room. Lorelei's jaw tightened. She gathered her notes with hands that were slightly less steady than usual, stacked them with precise corners, and tucked them into her portfolio. A mistake, she said. One I don't intend to repeat. She left. Ash sat alone in the strategy room, staring at the dark simulator, and filed the name Kieran in the place where he kept things that mattered and things that worried him, right next to the growing awareness that Lorelei's walls were exactly as high as they were because she'd been hurt badly enough to build them. He wanted to know what had happened. More than that, he wanted to make sure it never happened to her again. That second thought surprised him. He sat with it for a long time. The full battle happened at noon the next day, on the volcanic rock field behind the facility. Cynthia watched from the elevated observation platform, her Garchomp beside her, both of them perfectly still. She'd been invited to observe but not intervene. This was Lorelei's exercise, and whatever Cynthia thought about the methodology, she respected the intent. Ash stood on one side of the field, his team arrayed behind him in their Pokeballs. Pikachu was on the field beside him, ears forward, cheeks sparking. The sun was directly overhead, and the volcanic rock radiated heat that made the air shimmer. Lorelei stood on the opposite side, her team ready. She'd changed into her battle attire, the white and blue that made her look like winter personified. Her glasses caught the sun and threw light. "Standard rules," Lorelei said. 6 on 6. No holds barred. She paused. "I won't go easy on you. I'd be insulted if you did." Something flickered across her face, not quite a smile, but the echo of one. "Good." She threw her first Pokeball. Jinx materialized, its psychic aura rippling outward. Ash felt the pressure immediately, a subtle weight on his thoughts, Jinx's passive psychic field testing the boundaries of his concentration. "Pikachu, let's go." Pikachu darted forward, and the battle began. It lasted 43 minutes. It was the hardest fight of Ash's life. Lorelei was ruthless. Not cruel, there was no sadism in her battling, no desire to humiliate. But she was relentless, suffocating, and so far ahead of Ash strategically that by the fifth turn of their first exchange, he realized with dawning horror that she predicted his opening 3 moves before the battle started. Pikachu took down Jinx, but barely. Lorelei's Dugong came in and immediately established Hail, turning the field into a frozen wasteland that crippled Ash's visibility and boosted every one of her Ice-type attacks. Ash switched to Charizard to clear the weather with Sunny Day, and Lorelei punished the switch with a perfectly timed Hydro Pump from Dugong that caught Charizard before it could establish its fire. 4 turns. She'd controlled every one of them. Ash felt it, the suffocation Lorelei had warned him about. Every move he made was anticipated, redirected, or punished. She wasn't outpowering him, she was outthinking him, building walls of prediction around him and closing them in turn by turn. "You're reacting," she called across the field. "Not mocking, teaching, even now. Stop reacting." Ash gritted his teeth. Charizard was hurt, the hail was back, Lorelei's Piloswine had reset the weather after Dugong fell, and his mental map of the battle showed a losing position from every angle. So he threw the map away. Charizard, Blast Burn. Straight into the ground. Cynthia leaned forward on the observation platform. Charizard roared and dove, not at Piloswine, but at the volcanic rock beneath its feet. The blast burn detonated against the field itself, and the volcanic stone, already heat-saturated from the midday sun, exploded. Magma erupted from the shattered rock. Steam screamed into the air as the hail met superheated stone. The entire battlefield transformed from a frozen wasteland into a volcanic hellscape in 3 seconds. Piloswine screamed. The ice ground type was caught in a terrain it had no defense against, molten rock, superheated air, the ground itself turning hostile. It fainted without Charizard landing a direct hit. Lorelei's eyes went wide. For the first time, Ash saw her genuinely surprised. "You destroyed the field," she said. "You told me to stop reacting." Ash's grin was fierce, feral, the kind of expression that belonged on the face of someone who just discovered a new way to fight. "I decided to change the game instead." The battle continued. Lorelei adapted, because of course she did, she was Lorelei, but the momentum had shifted. Ash wasn't fighting her patterns anymore. He was creating his own, forcing her to react, dictating the tempo for the first time. He lost Charizard to her Cloyster Shell Smash combination. He lost Sceptile to a brilliantly timed freeze dry from Lapras. But he took Cloyster with Greninja's Water Shuriken, and he forced Lapras to burn its sheer cold early by threatening with Lucario's close combat. It came down to Pikachu versus Lapras. Both were battered. The field was unrecognizable, half molten rock, half frozen ice, a patchwork of destruction that told the story of the battle in scars. Thunderbolt, Ash said. Ice Beam, Lorelei countered. The attacks met. The collision lit up the sky, and for a heartbeat the world was nothing but light and sound and the raw, thrilling clash of two wills refusing to break. Pikachu went down first. The little electric mouse took the ice beam edge of the collision and hit the ground rolling, sparking, struggling to rise. It couldn't. Pikachu is unable to battle, the automated referee system announced. The winner is Lorelei. Ash stared at the field. Then he ran to Pikachu, scooping the small body into his arms, and held his partner close. You were incredible, buddy. Absolutely incredible. Pika. Pikachu murmured, nuzzling weakly into Ash's chest. Lorelei crossed the ruined field toward him. Her Lapras swayed behind her, barely standing, its shell cracked and its breath ragged. The margin of victory had been razor thin, one more exchange and it could have gone either way. She stopped in front of Ash and looked down at him, kneeling in the wreckage with Pikachu in his arms. Her expression was complex, satisfaction, respect, and something underneath both that she was trying very hard to control. You destroyed my field, she said. You told me to create the threat. I told you to dictate tempo. You turned a Pokémon battle into a geological event. She paused. It was the most creative tactical adaptation I've seen in 15 years of competitive battling. Ash looked up at her. But I still lost. You lost because my Lapras has 20 years of battle experience and your Pikachu, for all its power, couldn't match that depth in a sustained exchange. She crouched down to his level, and they were suddenly very close, close enough that he could see the way her pulse was beating in her throat, faster than her composed expression suggested. You lost because I'm better than you. Today. That gap closed by 40% in a single battle. So what's the plan for the other 60? We keep fighting. She reached out and, very gently, scratched Pikachu behind the ear. The electric mouse chirped weakly and leaned into her touch. You need to learn that losing to someone better isn't a failure. It's a measurement. Every loss tells you exactly how far you have to go. Cynthia says losing tells you who you are. Cynthia is a poet. I'm an engineer. But there was warmth in her voice when she said it, warmth and something else, something that had been growing over 3 weeks of late-night strategy sessions and morning coffee and the slow, inexorable erosion of walls built to withstand everything except genuine human connection. She stood and offered him her hand. He took it, and she pulled him up, and the motion brought them close, not as close as he and Cynthia had been on the beach, but close enough. Close enough that her cool blue eyes filled his entire field of vision and he could see the tiny fracture in her composure, the hairline crack where the Ice Queen ended and the woman began. Thank you, he said. For not holding back. I told you I wouldn't. I know. But there's a difference between saying it and meaning it. Lorelei held his gaze for a beat too long. Then she released his hand, adjusted her glasses with precise fingers, and turned back toward the facility. Recovery time, she said over her shoulder. Heal your team. Review the battle footage. I want your analysis of every mistake by tonight. Even the ones you made. She stopped walking. Turned halfway. The afternoon sun caught her face, and Ash saw something he'd never expected to see on Lorelei Conna's features, a genuine, unguarded, full smile. Especially those, she said. On the observation platform, Cynthia watched Lorelei walk away and watched Ash watch her go, and she felt a complicated knot of emotions tighten in her chest. Jealousy was in there, she wasn't noble enough to pretend otherwise. But so was admiration, because Lorelei had just pushed Ash harder than anyone had in years, and the result was exactly what he needed. And threaded through both feelings was a dawning, unsettling awareness that this wasn't just about mentorship anymore. Not for any of them. Her Garchomp rumbled beside her. "I know," she murmured. "I know." 4 days later, the stranger arrived. Ash was in the middle of an afternoon drill with Lucario, Cynthia's aura exercises combined with Lorelei's predictive observation, a fusion technique he'd been developing on his own, when Pikachu's ears snapped to attention. "Pika!" Ash stopped. Lucario's aura flared, its stance shifting from training mode to battle-ready in an instant. Someone was watching them from the tree-line. Ash didn't call out or move to investigate. He waited. Pikachu positioned itself at his right, Lucario at his left. Cynthia and Lorelei were both at the facility. He could feel Cynthia's warm aura distantly through the bond he'd been developing, and Lorelei's sharp presence was a cooler note beyond the trees. The Watcher stepped out of the forest. She was tall, almost as tall as Lorelei, with short-cropped dark hair and a lean, athletic build that spoke of a life spent outdoors. She wore a ranger-style jacket, faded and patched, over a black combat top. Her eyes were a striking amber, sharp and assessing, and they locked onto Ash with an intensity that made the air between them feel compressed. She had 3 Pokeballs on her belt. No more, no less. "Ash Ketchum," she said. "Not a question. That's me. My name is Marin Cross." She stopped at the edge of the training field, hands visible, posture neutral but ready. "I'm here to test you." "Test me for what?" "For whether you're worth caring about." She pulled a Pokeball from her belt and expanded it in her palm. "1-on-1. Right now. If you're as good as they say you are, it won't take long." Ash studied her. There was something in her bearing, a controlled tension, a banked fury, that reminded him of a coiled spring. She wasn't here for sport. Whatever this was about, it mattered to her. "Who sent you?" he asked. Marin's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "It might." "Then earn the answer." She threw the Pokeball. The light resolved into an Absol. Not a standard Absol, this one was scarred, massive, its blade horn longer than regulation and wickedly sharp. Its red eyes carried the weight of a Pokémon that had seen things it couldn't forget and had chosen violence as a coping mechanism. Pikachu stepped forward, but Ash held up a hand. "Lucario." The aura Pokémon moved to the field without hesitation. Ash felt their bond pulse, clean, strong, the silent communication that Cynthia had taught him now second nature. "Absol, swords dance," Marin commanded. "Aura sphere," Ash responded. Lucario's attack launched before Absol completed its power-up, a sphere of concentrated aura energy that screamed across the field. Absol dodged. Not barely, not desperately, it flowed aside with a liquid grace that spoke of training far beyond conventional methods. The aura sphere punched a crater in the volcanic rock where Absol had been standing. "Night Slash," Marin said. Absol blurred. Ash had trained against Cynthia's Garchomp and Lorelei's Lapras, and neither of them had prepared him for this. Absol's speed wasn't natural, it moved like something that had been pushed past its limits so many times that the limits had simply given up. Lucario took the hit. Dark energy raked across its chest, and the aura Pokémon staggered. Ash felt the pain echo through their bond, not physical pain, but the shock of impact, the disruption of focus. He steadied himself. Steadied Lucario through the bond. Detect. Then close combat. Lucario's eyes flashed. Absol came in for a follow-up psycho cut, and Lucario read it, not through observation, not through prediction, but through the aura. It sidestepped the slash by millimeters and drove a close combat combination into Absol's exposed flank. Absol flew. It hit the tree line, crashed through undergrowth, and came up snarling. It was hurt, Ash could see it in the way it favored its left side, but it wasn't done. Neither was Marin. "Sucker punch," she said, and her voice had changed. Harder. Colder. This wasn't just a battle. This was an interrogation. Sucker punch was a priority move, it hit before anything else if the opponent was preparing an attack. Ash had been about to call Aura Sphere, and if Lucario initiated, Absol would strike first. So he didn't attack. Calm mind. A non-offensive move. Sucker punch fizzled. Absol lunged forward and hit nothing. The priority move required the target to be attacking, and Lucario's calm mind was a status boost, not an attack. Marin's amber eyes widened. "You, Aura Sphere." Boosted by calm mind, the second Aura Sphere was twice as powerful as the first. It caught Absol mid-recovery and detonated on contact. The dark type was launched backward again, and this time it didn't get up. The silence that followed was filled with nothing but heavy breathing, from Lucario, from Absol, from Marin Cross, who stood across the ruined field with her fists clenched and her jaw locked tight. She recalled Absol. Her hand was shaking. "That's a well-trained Absol," Ash said carefully. "You've put a lot of work into it. Don't patronize me." "I'm not. I'm telling you what I see. That Absol trusts you completely. Its attack patterns are customized, not standard. The sword's dance opener into Night/Pressure is designed to overwhelm defensive trainers, and it would work against most of them." He paused. "Whoever taught you that framework knows what they're doing." Marin stared at him. The fury in her eyes was still there, but something else was surfacing, surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of doubt. "You wanted to know who sent me," she said. "Yeah. His name is Kieran Voss. He was a trainer. The best trainer of his generation. Better than your champion. Better than your Ice Queen." Her voice cracked on the word was. "The Pokémon League destroyed his life, and your mentors helped cover it up." Ash felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you talking about?" Marin reached into her jacket and pulled out a data drive, small, black, unmarked. She tossed it to him. He caught it. "Project Genesis," she said. "That's everything. The research proposal, the authorization documents, the test results. And the casualty reports." Her amber eyes were bright with unshed tears. 6 Pokémon, Mr. Ketchum. His entire team. They took them for experimentation. Something about replicating the trainer-Pokémon bond artificially, creating synthetic connections that could be assigned to anyone. Military application. She swallowed. The experiments failed. All 6 Pokémon died. And the League buried it. Classified. Sealed. Forgotten. Ash looked at the data drive in his hand. It weighed almost nothing. It felt like an anchor. "Ask your mentors," Marin said. She turned to leave. "Ask them what they knew. Ask them when they knew it. And then decide if the system you're fighting to climb is worth climbing." She vanished into the tree line like a ghost. Ash stood on the training field, Lucario watchful at his side, Pikachu pressed against his ankle, and stared at the small black drive in his palm. The afternoon sun was warm on his skin, and the ocean whispered in the distance, and everything felt exactly the same as it had 5 minutes ago except that nothing was. He brought the data drive to the common room and plugged it into the terminal without preamble. Cynthia and Lorelei were both there, Cynthia on the couch with a book on Sinnoh mythology, Lorelei at the table with her portfolio. They looked up when Ash entered, and both of them read his expression instantly. "What happened?" Cynthia asked, closing her book. Ash didn't answer. He activated the terminal, and the files loaded. Documents. Video files. Timestamps going back 7 years. The PWA seal on every page. "Project Genesis," he said. "Tell me what you know." The temperature in the room dropped. Not metaphorically, Lorelei's hand had gone to her belt instinctively, a reflex that triggered a Frostora response from whatever ice-type pokeball she'd touched. She pulled her hand away, but the damage was done. The air around her was visibly cold. Cynthia had gone very still. The kind of stillness that Ash recognized from their battle, the calm before Garchomp's dragon claw. "Where did you get that name?" Cynthia asked. "A trainer named Marin Cross showed up on the island 20 minutes ago. Challenged me to a battle. Lost." He looked between them. "She said Kieran Voss sent her." Lorelei's face drained of color. Ash had never seen her lose composure so completely, and the sight of it, the Ice Queen of Kanto looking like someone had just driven a knife between her ribs, told him more than any file could. "She gave me this." He gestured at the terminal. "Everything about Project Genesis. The research, the authorization, the results. And the dead Pokémon." Silence. "Tell me," Ash said. His voice was quiet. Controlled. The fire was burning very, very low and very, very hot. "Both of you. Everything." Cynthia spoke first. She sat forward on the couch, her hands clasped between her knees, her eyes on the floor. "I heard rumors. 3 years ago, maybe 4. Whispers at champion-level briefings about a classified research initiative that had been terminated. I pressed for details twice. Both times I was told it was above my clearance level and that the project had been shut down with no lasting consequences." She looked up at Ash. "I should have pushed harder. I knew something was wrong. The way they deflected, it wasn't bureaucratic, it was afraid. But I let it go. I had the Sinnoh League to run, and I told myself that if it was truly terrible, someone would have escalated." "Someone did," Ash said. "Kieran Voss." Cynthia flinched. Ash turned to Lorelei. "And you?" Lorelei had removed her glasses. She was staring at the wall with the unfocused gaze of someone looking at something far away and long ago. "I knew more," she said flatly. "I was on the Kanto League's internal review board when the project was proposed. The proposal was framed as a humanitarian initiative, developing technology to strengthen trainer Pokémon bonds for rescue operations and disaster response. I voted to approve it." She paused. "I didn't know about the military application. I didn't know about the methodology. I was told it was non-invasive research. Behavioral studies, bonding exercises, standard laboratory protocols." Her voice cracked on standard. "When the project was terminated, I received a sealed briefing. 5 sentences. Project Genesis has been concluded. Results were inconclusive. All research materials have been archived. No further action is required. This matter is classified under League Security Protocol 7. She finally looked at Ash. "I didn't know about the Pokémon deaths until after. A colleague told me privately, months later. By then, the files were sealed, the researchers had been reassigned, and Kieran Voss had disappeared. And you didn't do anything." The words hung in the air like a blade. "No," Lorelei said. "I didn't." Ash looked at the files on the screen. 6 Pokémon profiles. A Typhlosion, an Espion, a Steelix, a Heracross, a Swellow, a Miltank. Each one with a trainer ID linked to Kieran Voss. Each one with a termination date. Same day. Same facility. He felt sick. "This is real," he said. "The League used a trainer's Pokémon as test subjects, killed them, and covered it up." "Yes," Cynthia said. "Yes," Lorelei said. Ash closed his eyes. Pikachu pressed against his leg, and he could feel the electric mouse trembling, not from fear, but from the empathic echo of Ash's emotions flowing through their bond. He reached down and placed his hand on Pikachu's head, steadying them both. He thought about Kieran Voss. A trainer who'd been brilliant enough to rival champions, whose entire team had been stolen and killed by the institution he'd trusted. Ash thought about what that would feel like, losing Pikachu, losing Charizard, losing all of them, not to battle or illness but to betrayal. The people who were supposed to protect the bond between trainers and Pokémon had broken it in the most fundamental way possible. If that had happened to him, what would he have become? He opened his eyes. I'm going to ask you both something, and I need the truth. Cynthia nodded. Lorelei nodded. If you'd known. If you'd known exactly what was happening, the experiments, the deaths, all of it, while it was happening. Would you have stopped it? Cynthia answered immediately. Yes. Lorelei took longer. She was staring at the termination reports on the screen, at 6 Pokémon who died because a bureaucracy had decided they were acceptable losses. I want to say yes, she said. But I don't know. I was younger. I trusted the system more than I should have. I believed that the people above me had reasons for their decisions that I couldn't see. She met Ash's eyes, and there were tears on her cheeks, the first tears Ash had ever seen from the Ice Queen, and they fell straight and silent, without drama, without performance. I would like to think I would have stopped it. But I don't know, and I won't lie to you. Ash held her gaze. Then he nodded. The silence stretched. I need to be alone, he said. He turned off the terminal, pocketed the data drive, and walked toward the door. Ash, Cynthia started. Not right now. He didn't turn around. His voice wasn't angry. It was something worse. It was quiet, the deep, unsettling quiet of someone processing something that had shifted the foundations of their world. He walked out. Pikachu followed at his heels. Cynthia and Lorelei sat in the common room together, and for the first time since they'd arrived on Savault Island, neither of them had anything to say. The silence between them wasn't competitive or loaded or tinged with rivalry. It was the hollow, shared silence of two people who just watched someone they cared about look at them and see, for the first time, something less than what they wanted to be. He'll come back, Cynthia said eventually. Lorelei wiped her face with the back of her hand, a rough, unpolished gesture that was completely unlike her. Will he? He's Ash. He doesn't run. He has every reason to. Cynthia looked at Lorelei, really looked, without the filter of competition or professional assessment. She saw a woman who was exhausted, heartbroken, and deeply afraid of losing something she'd only just begun to understand she wanted. He'll come back, Cynthia repeated. And when he does, we need to be ready. Not with excuses. With action. Lorelei replaced her glasses. Her hands were steady again, the Ice Queen reassembling herself piece by piece. What kind of action? The files Marin gave him. If they're authentic, we have the evidence to force a full investigation. Public. Transparent. No more sealed briefings. That would destroy careers. Destabilize the league. Good. Cynthia's gray eyes were hard. If the league can survive the truth, it deserves to. If it can't, it doesn't deserve our protection. Lorelei stared at her. You'd burn it down. I'd let the light in. Whatever burns was already rotten. Cynthia paused. And I'd rather Ash see us fighting to fix this than hiding behind protocol. Something shifted in Lorelei's expression. The defensive walls didn't come down, they never came down all at once, but a door opened. A small one. Agreed, she said. They sat together in the quiet room as the sun descended and the shadows lengthened, and they began to plan. Ash spent 4 hours on the northern cliffs. He sat on the volcanic rock with Pikachu in his lap and his full team released around him. They didn't train. They didn't spar. They just existed together. Charizard curled behind him like a living furnace, its tail flame casting dancing shadows on the rock face. Greninja stood at the cliff's edge, watching the ocean with the stillness of a meditation master. Lucario sat cross-legged nearby, aura senses extended, standing guard without being asked. Sceptile lounged in the fading sunlight, seeds humming softly. Jengar had hidden in Charizard's shadow and was making faces at Pikachu, who was ignoring it with the practiced patience of a long partnership. Ash thought about Kieran Voss's Typhlosion. Had it trusted him the way Charizard trusted Ash? Had it stood behind him on cold nights, keeping him warm? Had it fought and bled and given everything because it believed, because it knew, that its trainer would never let it come to harm? And then the League had taken it. Had strapped it to a table in a laboratory and tried to extract the love out of it like mining ore from rock, and when the extraction failed, when the Typhlosion broke under the process, they'd written a 5-sentence memo and moved on. Ash pressed his face into Pikachu's fur. The electric mouse nuzzled into him, and their bond pulsed, strong, warm, alive. Real. He wasn't angry at Cynthia. He wasn't angry at Lorelei. They hadn't done this. They'd failed to prevent it, Cynthia through inaction, Lorelei through misplaced trust, but they hadn't done it. The difference mattered. What he was angry at was the system that had made it possible. The layers of bureaucracy and protocol and classified clearances that had allowed 6 Pokémon to be murdered in the name of progress and then buried under paperwork. The machine that turned living bonds into research data and living beings into acceptable losses. And now Kieran Voss was out there, collecting fragments of divine power, and Ash understood why. He didn't agree, couldn't agree, because severing all trainer Pokémon bonds would destroy relationships like the one he had with Pikachu, relationships that were real and good and freely chosen. But he understood the wound that drove it. The wound was legitimate. The system had failed Kieran in a way that was beyond forgiveness. The question was, could the system be reformed? Or was it too broken to save? Ash looked at his team, 6 Pokémon who'd chosen to be with him, who stayed not because of Pokeballs or obligation but because of love, trust, and shared purpose. They were proof that the bond could be real. That it didn't have to be a leash. But proof wasn't enough. Proof was passive. Proof was a shield, not a sword. If the system could do what it did to Kieran's team, then the system needed to change. Not from the outside, not through destruction, from the inside, through the painful, unglamorous work of forcing accountability and building something better. Ash stood up. His team looked at him. "We have work to do," he said. "And it's bigger than a tournament." Charizard rumbled. "Yeah. We're still going to win the tournament too." He smiled, smaller than usual, heavier, but genuine. "But we're also going to make sure what happened to Kieran's team never happens again. To anyone." He recalled his team one by one, touching each Pokeball with a gentleness that was almost reverent. Then he walked back down the cliff toward the facility, Pikachu on his shoulder, and the sunset painted his shadow long and sharp across the volcanic stone. Cynthia and Lorelei were in the common room when he returned. They were sitting together at the table, actually together, side by side, not across from each other, with the terminal active and documents spread between them. They looked up when Ash entered, and he could read the tension in both of them. Cynthia's warmth was strained. Lorelei's composure was rebuilt but brittle. Ash sat down across from them. Pikachu hopped onto the table between them. "Here's what I've decided," he said. "I'm not angry at either of you. You didn't do this. You failed to stop it, and that matters, but it's not the same thing." He saw Lorelei's shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. Cynthia's breath released slowly. "But," Ash continued, "the system that did this is the same system we're all part of. The League, the PWA, the tournament, all of it runs on the assumption that the people at the top are trustworthy. If that assumption is wrong, and it clearly is, at least partially, then climbing to the top isn't enough. I need to get there and then change things." He looked at the documents on the table. "What are you two working on?" "A strategy," Cynthia said. "For making the Project Genesis files public through official channels. If we time it correctly, after the tournament, when the world champion has the maximum political capital, we can force a full investigation that can't be buried. After the tournament? Why not now? Because right now, the PWA can dismiss the files as unverified, Lorelei said. They'll claim foreign interference, political sabotage, or fabrication. We need the files authenticated by an independent body, and we need someone with enough authority to demand accountability. She paused. That someone needs to be the world champion. Me. You. Ash looked between them, the Sinnoh champion and the Kanto Elite Four, two women who'd been competing for the right to mentor him 3 weeks ago and were now sitting side by side, planning institutional reform. The irony wasn't lost on him. There's something else, Ash said. Marin Cross told me Kieran Voss sent her. She said he was the best trainer of his generation. She said he's moving. He pulled the data drive from his pocket and set it on the table. What do you know about him? Cynthia and Lorelei exchanged a glance. The kind of glance that carries the weight of shared history. Kieran was my friend, Cynthia said. During my early years as champion, he was the trainer everyone assumed would challenge me first. We trained together, battled together, pushed each other. He had a gift for reading Pokemon that was. She searched for the word. Supernatural. Not aura, not psychic ability. Something else. An empathy so deep it was almost painful. He was my student, Lorelei said. The admission cost her, Ash could see it in the way her fingers tightened around her pen. Before you. The only student I've ever taken. He came to me wanting to learn tactical structure, the same way you did. I taught him everything I knew about competitive strategy. What happened? Project Genesis happened. Cynthia's voice was quiet. His team was selected for the experiments. He didn't know until they were already dead. When he found out, he confronted the League directly. They stonewalled him. Threatened him with legal action if he went public. And then he disappeared. I tried to find him, Lorelei said. For 2 years. He'd cut every contact, abandoned every identity. It was like he'd never existed. She paused. The message I received before we came to this island, the coded communication, it was from him. The first word I'd had in 5 years. What did it say? You taught me well. Watch what I've learned. The room was very quiet. He's collecting something, Ash said. The energy surges at the ruins in Hoenn, I've been following the reports. Something was taken from an ancient site 3 days ago. The researchers reported a massive power fluctuation and then the site went dark. Cynthia nodded slowly. I have a theory about what he's after, but I need to verify it. There are texts in the Celestic Town archives about artifacts called the Fragments of Origin, shards of Arceus's creative power, used at the beginning of the world to forge the bond between humans and Pokemon. And if someone collected them? Theoretically, they could undo what Arceus created. Sever the bond entirely. Not just Pokeballs, the fundamental spiritual connection between our species. Ash felt the cold settle into his bones. Every trainer and Pokemon. Everywhere. Every single one. He looked at Pikachu, who was sitting in the middle of the table, watching the conversation with dark, intelligent eyes. The little electric mouse met his gaze, and Ash felt their bond pulse, felt the warmth, the trust, the years of shared joy and pain and laughter and tears. The idea of that bond being ripped away, not weakened, not strained, but severed, like cutting a nerve, was the most terrifying thing Ash Ketchum had ever contemplated. Then we stop him, Ash said. We prepare for the tournament, we get to the top, we force accountability for Project Genesis, and we stop Kieran before he can do something that can't be undone. All of that? Lorelei asked, but there was something in her voice that wasn't skepticism. It was something closer to admiration. And beneath that, something warmer that she was fighting very hard not to let show. All of that. Ash leaned forward. I didn't come this far to do things halfway. Cynthia looked at Lorelei. Lorelei looked at Cynthia. And for the first time, there was no competition in the glance, no rivalry, no professional one-upmanship. There was just the shared recognition of two extraordinary women who'd both arrived at the same conclusion: this young man was something they'd never encountered before. And whatever they felt about him, whatever was growing in the spaces between late-night conversations and morning training and battles that felt like dancing, it wasn't going away. "Then we have work to do," Cynthia said, standing. "All three of us." "Agreed," Lorelei said, standing as well. "I'll begin revising the training schedule to account for potential confrontations with fragment-enhanced opponents. If Kieran has access to even one shard of divine power, his team will be operating at a level beyond anything in my current models. I'll contact researchers in Celestic Town about the remaining fragment locations," Cynthia said. "If we can predict where Kieran will move next, we can be there first." Ash looked between them, and despite everything, the revelation, the danger, the weight of what was coming, he felt a surge of something fierce and bright in his chest. "This is going to be a hell of a tournament," he said. Cynthia smiled. Lorelei almost did. They got to work. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Ash's life. Training evolved from mentorship into something closer to a war council. Cynthia and Lorelei stopped dividing the day between them and started integrating their approaches, Cynthia's empathic battling techniques woven into Lorelei's tactical frameworks, creating a synthesis that was greater than the sum of its parts. They argued constantly. Not about Ash, about methodology, about philosophy, about the nature of competitive battling itself. The arguments were fierce, intellectual, and occasionally explosive, but they were never personal. Both women had too much respect for each other's abilities to descend into pettiness, and the friction between their approaches produced heat that Ash used to forge himself sharper. He trained 12 hours a day. Silent communication drills at dawn with Cynthia. Tactical simulations through the afternoon with Lorelei. Full-team sparring sessions in the evening where both mentors attacked him simultaneously, forcing him to synthesize intuition and strategy in real time against two champion-level opponents. He lost those sessions. Every single time. But the gap narrowed. Day by day, battle by battle, the gap narrowed. His team evolved with him. Pikachu developed a new variant of Iron Tail that incorporated the ground-sensing technique Cynthia had taught Ash. The little mouse could now feel vibrations through its tail and predict incoming attacks from opponents it couldn't see. Charizard's Blast Burn became a surgical tool rather than a blunt instrument, capable of being directed with a precision that made Lorelei nod in approval. Greninja's Battle Bond hold time extended to 7 minutes, then 10, then 15. Lucario became something extraordinary. The combination of Cynthia's aura work and Lorelei's analytical framework transformed the fighting type into a battle sensor, capable of reading enemy movements through aura while simultaneously processing tactical information from Ash's strategic callouts. It was the living embodiment of the synthesis Ash was building. Sceptile learned to use terrain in ways that turned any battlefield into a jungle fortress. Gengar developed a Destiny Bond variant that could be held in reserve for multiple turns, turning every exchange into a psychological threat. Ash was becoming something new. Not just a better trainer, a new kind of trainer. One who felt the soul of the battle and read its science simultaneously. One who could trust his instincts and verify them with analysis in the same breath. And throughout all of it, the three of them grew closer. It happened in small moments. Cynthia leaving her mythology books on the common room table, pages marked with notes for Ash about legendary Pokémon behavior patterns. Lorelei adjusting the collar of Ash's jacket before a practice session, smoothing the fabric with efficient fingers, then catching herself and pulling back with a faint blush that she covered by adjusting her glasses. Ash bringing both of them tea after midnight, green for Lorelei, chamomile for Cynthia, because he'd memorized their preferences without being told. It happened in the way Cynthia laughed more easily now, the sound of it filling rooms that had been too quiet for too long. In the way Lorelei's walls developed windows, and sometimes doors, and sometimes Ash would find her on the facility's roof at night, looking at the stars with an expression that was almost peaceful. It happened in the way Ash found himself looking forward to dawn, not just for the training, but for the moments before and after, Cynthia's voice soft in the early light, Lorelei's sharp wit cutting through the fog, the three of them existing in a space that felt like it belonged to them alone. One evening, near the end of the second week, Ash was working on silent communication with Greninja while Cynthia observed. The session had run long, the sun was setting, painting the ocean in oranges and reds, and the air was warm and salt-tinged. Ash called a break. Greninja relaxed from battle bond form and went to cool off in the shallows. Ash dropped onto the sand, breathing hard, and Cynthia sat beside him. "You're holding the bond form for 18 minutes now," she said. "That's beyond what I thought was possible. Feels longer from the inside." "I imagine it does." She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset. "Ash, can I tell you something?" "Always. I've been champion for 9 years. In that time, I've been surrounded by people who want things from me, challengers who want my title, politicians who want my endorsement, fans who want my attention. Everyone I interact with sees the champion first and Cynthia second." She turned to look at him. The sunset light caught her face, and she was so beautiful in that moment that Ash felt his chest ache. "You're the first person in a very long time who sees Cynthia first. That's because Cynthia's more interesting than the champion." She laughed softly. "You say things like that so easily. Like it costs you nothing." "It doesn't cost me anything. It's just true." They were sitting close. Close enough that their shoulders touched. Ash could feel the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her sleeve, and their auras, his wild and bright, hers deep and golden, mingled in the space between them like two rivers meeting. Cynthia reached over and took his hand. She didn't ask permission. She didn't hesitate. She simply laced her fingers through his and held on, and Ash felt her pulse through her palm, steady, strong, but faster than it should have been. "I'm supposed to be your mentor," she murmured. "This isn't professional." "Was it ever just professional?" "No." She squeezed his hand. "No, it wasn't." They sat together on the beach as the sun went down, hand in hand, and neither of them spoke again for a long time. The silence was warm and full and said everything that words would have made smaller. When they finally stood to go back to the facility, Cynthia held his hand for one extra moment, then released it with a smile that was sad and hopeful in equal measure. "Don't tell Lorelei," she said. "Don't tell Lorelei what?" Cynthia gave him a look. "That I'm falling for you." She walked away before he could respond, and Ash stood on the darkening beach with sand between his toes and his heart doing things that no amount of training had prepared him for. 2 nights later, Ash couldn't sleep again. This time, Lorelei wasn't in the common room. She was on the roof. He found her sitting at the edge, legs dangling over the side, her usual professional posture abandoned for something more human, shoulders curved, head tilted back, her auburn hair loose and catching the starlight. She was wearing a sweater that was too big for her. Ash recognized it as one from the facility's supply closet, the kind of shapeless, comfortable garment that no one wore in public, and she looked younger than her 28 years. Vulnerable in a way that the Elite Four would never have allowed. He sat down beside her. "Not too close. Close enough. Stars are good tonight," he said. "Light pollution is minimal on the island. The nearest population center is 400 kilometers southeast." She paused. "That wasn't what you wanted to talk about." "No." "Then say what you came to say." Ash looked at her profile. The sharp jaw, the straight nose, the glasses she wasn't wearing for once. Her eyes without the lenses were softer, more open, gray-blue instead of ice blue, like the sea on a cloudy day. "Kieran," he said. "You said he was your only student before me. You said you taught him everything." Lorelei's jaw tightened. But she didn't close off, not completely. The door she'd opened during their first late-night conversation stayed cracked. He was 19 when he came to me, she said. Brilliant. Aggressive. Angry in a way that I recognized because I'd been the same at his age. She looked at the stars. I was 23. Young for an Elite Four member. Desperate to prove that my appointment wasn't political. He was the first person who made me feel like a teacher instead of a title. What went wrong? Everything. Nothing. She exhaled. I taught him tactical structure. Tempo control, prediction matrices, the things I've been teaching you. He absorbed it faster than anyone I'd ever seen. But he was also, she stopped, searching for words. Kieran had a capacity for connection that was almost terrifying. His bond with his Pokemon wasn't like a normal trainer's. It was more like what you have, deep, intuitive, almost psychic. But where yours is bright and open, his was, consuming. He needed them the way other people need oxygen. They weren't just his team. They were his world. Ash thought about his own team. About Pikachu sleeping on his chest. About Charizard's fire warming him on cold nights. About the way Greninja's presence in the back of his mind felt like home. I understand that, he said. I know you do. That's why you scare me. He looked at her. She was still staring at the stars, but her eyes were glistening. When they took his team, when Project Genesis took everything from him, the structure I'd given him shattered. All that tactical discipline, all that strategic control, it meant nothing without the Pokemon it was built to protect. And without the structure. She trailed off. He became something else. Something that scares me more than any opponent I've ever faced in battle. You feel responsible. I am responsible. Her voice was hard. I gave a weapon to a man who was one trauma away from using it on the world. I should have seen the fragility underneath the brilliance. I should have, her breath hitched. She pressed her fingers to her eyes and forced herself steady. I should have been more than a teacher. I should have been a friend. But I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be anything other than what I was, cold, controlled, professional. Perfect. The last word was poison. The perfect Elite Four member who didn't know how to be a person. Ash moved closer. Not much. Just enough that their arms were touching. You're a person now, he said. Lorelei dropped her hand from her eyes and looked at him. In the starlight, with her walls down and her armor off, she looked like someone who'd been holding her breath for 5 years and had just remembered how to exhale. How do you do that? She whispered. Do what? Say the exact thing I need to hear without knowing that I need to hear it. Maybe I do know. She stared at him. The air between them was charged, not warm and flowing like the moments with Cynthia, but electric, sharp, alive. Like standing in a thunderstorm and choosing not to run. Lorelei moved first. She leaned in and kissed him. It was brief, 2 seconds, maybe 3, and it was everything she was, precise, intense, and underneath the control, desperately uncertain. Her lips were cool, and her hand came up to grip his collar with fingers that shook almost imperceptibly, and then she pulled back and stared at him with wide eyes that said she couldn't believe she'd just done that. I'm sorry, she said immediately. That was, I shouldn't have, this is completely inappropriate, you're my student and I'm, Lorelei. Clearly overstepping professional boundaries and I understand if you want to, Lorelei. She stopped. Ash reached out and gently removed her hand from his collar, not pushing her away, just holding it, his fingers wrapping around hers. Don't apologize for being honest, he said. She looked at their joined hands. Then at his face. This is complicated. Yeah. Cynthia, I know. Her eyes sharpened. You know. I know that what I feel isn't simple. And I know that pretending it doesn't exist would make me a liar, and I'm a terrible liar. Lorelei studied him with the analytical intensity she brought to battle simulations, but underneath it, Ash could see something softer. Something that had been locked behind ice for years and was now, slowly, miraculously, beginning to thaw. "You're going to be the death of me, Ash Ketchum," she said. Hopefully not literally. She almost laughed. "Almost. I need time to process this. Take whatever time you need." She nodded, stood, and walked toward the roof access door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Ash." "Yeah." "The training schedule for tomorrow. I moved your morning session back by 30 minutes. "Why?" "Because you're going to be up late tonight sitting on this roof thinking about what just happened, and you'll need the extra sleep." She looked over her shoulder, and the corner of her mouth curved upward. "I'm your mentor. It's my job to anticipate your needs." She disappeared through the door. Ash sat on the roof alone, under the stars, with the taste of Lorelei's kiss still on his lips and Cynthia's hand still warm in his memory, and he thought about the fact that he was training for the most important tournament in Pokémon history while simultaneously developing feelings for two of the most powerful women alive while also preparing to confront a traumatized genius with divine power who wanted to unmake the fundamental relationship between humans and Pokémon. Pika. Pikachu had appeared on the roof, because of course Pikachu had appeared on the roof. The little mouse hopped into his lap and looked up at him with an expression that was somehow both sympathetic and judgmental. "Yeah, buddy," Ash said, scratching behind Pikachu's ears. "I know." He stayed on the roof for another hour, watching the stars whirl overhead, feeling the weight and wonder of everything that was happening, everything that was coming. The tournament. Kieran. The fragments. Cynthia's warmth and Lorelei's fire and his own heart doing things he'd never expected it to do. The world was bigger than he'd thought. More broken. More beautiful. He was going to fight for it anyway. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Ash dragged himself out of bed 30 minutes later than usual, exactly as Lorelei had predicted, and found both women already on the beach training field, standing with their Pokémon in the dawn light. They weren't talking. They were simply coexisting. Cynthia doing her meditation forms by the waterline, Garchomp moving in sync beside her. Lorelei reviewing notes on a tablet while Lapras floated in the shallows nearby. Two parallel lines that hadn't quite converged. Ash stepped onto the sand, and both women looked at him at the same time. Something passed between the three of them in that moment, a recognition, a realignment. Whatever had happened on the beach at sunset and whatever had happened on the rooftop under the stars existed in the same space now, visible if not yet named. Cynthia's eyes flickered to Lorelei. Lorelei's eyes flickered to Cynthia. And both of them saw, in the other, a mirror of something they hadn't expected to share. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Ash said, "Morning. What are we working on?" And the moment passed, and they trained, and the world continued to turn. But something had shifted. The air between the three of them was different now, charged, alive, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Not the danger of conflict. The danger of honesty. The danger of three extraordinary people standing at the edge of something that could change everything. In the distance, beyond the horizon, storm clouds gathered over the Sinnoh mainland. The Grand Masters tournament was 3 weeks away. Kieran Voss was moving. The fragments of origin were calling. And on a small island in the southern seas, a young man with a Pikachu on his shoulder and two remarkable women at his side looked toward the future with clear eyes and an unbroken heart and decided, again, as he always had, as he always would, to run toward whatever came next. He didn't see the news alert that flashed across Lorelei's tablet, briefly, before she silenced it. Breaking, second fragment site in Johto confirmed breached. Energy signatures consistent with Hoenn incident. PWA investigation ongoing. Lorelei read it. Looked at Cynthia. Cynthia read it over her shoulder. They didn't tell Ash. Not yet. He needed this morning, this one, clear, uncomplicated morning of training and growth and the simple joy of getting stronger. They'd tell him tonight. The storm could wait a few more hours. Chapter 3, The Fracture, 10,000 plus words. Primary conflict, large-scale threat plus emotional crisis plus political betrayal. The tournament begins. The Grand Masters tournament opens at the Coronet Arena in Sinno, a massive stadium built at the base of Coronet. Trainers from every region have gathered. The atmosphere is electric. Ash enters as an underdog on paper but a favorite in spirit. The crowd loves him. Ash's tournament battles, we see Ash tear through his bracket with a style that's unmistakably new, Cynthia's intuition fused with Lorelei's strategy, all filtered through Ash's own wild creativity. He's not just winning, he's making champions nervous. Cynthia and Lorelei watch from the stands together, and there's a moment where they look at each other with the same expression, pride, awe, and something they can't name. Political betrayal. Lorelei discovers that Bruno, her fellow Kanto Elite Four member, has been feeding information to Kieran Voss. Bruno's motivation isn't evil, he's a traditionalist who believes the league has become corrupt and that Kieran's cause has merit. This betrayal cuts Lorelei deeply, and she must decide whether to expose Bruno publicly, destroying Kanto's political standing, or handle it quietly, compromising her integrity. Ash helps her navigate this, not by telling her what to do, but by asking the right questions. She exposes Bruno. It costs Kanto politically. She doesn't regret it. Kieran Voss appears. During the quarterfinals, Kieran walks into the arena. He's not here to compete, he's here to deliver a message. He broadcasts the truth about Project Genesis to the entire world. The footage. The dead Pokémon. The league's cover-up. The crowd erupts. Protests break out. The tournament is thrown into chaos. The attack, Kieran, now wielding two fragments of origin, unleashes legendary tier power. He doesn't attack trainers, he targets the Pokeballs themselves, demonstrating his ability to sever the bond between trainer and Pokémon. Dozens of Pokémon are forcibly released. The arena descends into panic. Ash's Pokémon resist because their bond with him is genuine, not mechanical, but he watches others' Pokémon flee in confusion, and it shakes him. Ash vs Marin Cross, round 2. While Kieran withdraws, Marin stays to cover his retreat. Ash battles her again, but this time the stakes are real. People are in danger. The battle is raw, desperate, and spectacular. Ash wins definitively, and in the aftermath, Marin hesitates. She sees how Ash's Pokémon chose to stay with him. It plants a seed of doubt. Cynthia's confrontation. Cynthia catches up to Kieran before he leaves. Their conversation is the emotional centerpiece of the chapter. They were friends. Maybe more. She begs him to stop. He tells her he can't, not when the system killed his family, his Pokémon. He tells her she's wasting herself on a broken world. She tells him he's become the very thing he hates, someone who takes choice away. He leaves. She doesn't cry until he's gone. Emotional climax. That night, in the aftermath of the attack, everything comes to a head. Lorelei finds Ash on the arena roof, staring at the stars. She sits beside him. She tells him she's never been good at saying what she feels, but she needs him to know, he's not just her student. He hasn't been for a long time. She kisses him, brief, fierce, precise, exactly like her. Hours later, Cynthia finds Ash still on the roof. She's been crying, he can tell even though she's composed now. She doesn't confess with words. She takes his hand and puts it over her heart so he can feel it racing. She says, "This is what you do to me, and I'm terrified, and I don't want it to stop." He pulls her close. Ash doesn't lie to either of them. He tells each of them the truth, that he feels something profound for both of them, that he won't pretend otherwise, and that he refuses to let this become a competition because they are not prizes to be won and he is not a trophy to fight over. They're people. All three of them. Closing beat, the three of them sit together in Cynthia's quarters. It's awkward. It's honest. Lorelei says, this is unconventional. Cynthia says, we're three of the most powerful trainers alive. Since when do we do conventional? Ash says, can we figure out the relationship stuff after we stop the guy trying to end Pokemon training forever? All three laugh. It's the first real laugh any of them have shared. Something settles. Something begins. Chapter 4, Ascension, 10,000 plus words. The final confrontation unfolds at the Spear Pillar as Kieran makes his move to complete his plan, forcing the Grand Masters tournament to be suspended. Ash leads Cynthia and Lorelei in a coalition against him, culminating in an ideological battle where Kieran's tragic backstory, losing everything when the league system failed him, forces Ash to find victory without destruction. The romantic tension resolves naturally as all three accept their feelings for one another, creating a mature polyamorous dynamic that mirrors their equal partnership. I'm settling on an original antagonist rather than using an existing character. It gives me more flexibility to weave connections to both mentors. Kieran Voss is a fallen prodigy who trained under Lorelei and rivaled Cynthia, but lost everything when a league experiment went catastrophically wrong, leaving him convinced that the trainer-Pokemon bond itself is exploitative and driving him to seek the fragments of origin. Story outline and chapter breakdown. The Champion's Heart. What if Cynthia and Lorelei competed to be Ash's mentor and ended up falling in love with him? Core premise: Ash Ketchum, aged 19, has torn through the competitive Pokemon circuit with raw brilliance but no formal champion-level refinement. When the Pokemon World Association announces the first-ever Grand Masters tournament, a competition to crown a single world champion above all regional champions, Ash becomes the most sought-after rising star in the world. Two of the most powerful women in competitive battling step forward to mentor him: Cynthia, the Sinnoh champion, who sees in Ash a kindred spirit and an intuition that mirrors her own, and Lorelei, the Kanto Elite Four Ice Queen, who recognizes in him a diamond that needs cutting and discipline to reach its true potential. What begins as professional rivalry between two elite trainers slowly transforms into something far more personal, and far more dangerous, as both women find themselves drawn not just to Ash's potential, but to the young man himself, his warmth, his unshakable conviction, and the way he makes them feel seen beyond their titles. Meanwhile, an escalating threat emerges from the shadows, one deeply personal to both Cynthia and Lorelei, that will test not only Ash's growing power, but the bonds forming between the three of them. Main characters: Ash Ketchum, 19, no longer the reckless kid. He's sharpened through years of travel, battle, and loss. But he's still unmistakably Ash, driven by heart, fiercely loyal, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to connect with Pokemon. His weakness: he fights on instinct alone. Against champion-tier opponents, instinct isn't enough. He needs structure, strategy, and the ability to think 3 moves ahead. His strength: he adapts mid-battle faster than anyone alive. His Pokemon trust him absolutely. His emotional clarity, the ability to read both Pokemon and people, is unmatched. He's magnetically genuine in a world full of politics and posturing, which is exactly why both Cynthia and Lorelei fall for him. Cynthia Sharona, 27, Sinnoh champion. Elegant, philosophical, warm beneath her composed exterior. She battles like a poet, fluid, unpredictable, always searching for the beautiful move. Her mentoring style, intuition-based. She pushes Ash to feel the battle, to trust the bond between trainer and Pokemon above all else. Her vulnerability: she's lonely at the top. Being champion has made her an icon, not a person. Ash treats her like a human being, and it disarms her completely. Her connection to the villain: Kieran Voss was her closest friend during her rise. His fall haunts her. Lorelei Kanna, 28, Kanto Elite 4, the Ice-type master. Sharp, disciplined, intellectually fierce. She battles like a chess grandmaster, calculated, suffocating, always controlling the board. Her mentoring style: strategy and discipline. She teaches Ash to think ahead, to control tempo, to weaponize patience. Her vulnerability: she spent her career being respected but never truly wanted. She keeps people at arm's length. Ash's stubborn warmth breaks through her walls. Her connection to the villain, Kieran, was her first and only student before Ash. His betrayal of everything she taught him is a wound she hasn't healed. Antagonist Kieran Voss, 30, former prodigy. Once considered the strongest trainer of his generation, stronger than Cynthia, sharper than Lorelei. He was destined to be the world champion before anyone knew such a title could exist. Backstory: 5 years ago, the Pokémon League sanctioned a classified research project, an attempt to artificially replicate the bond between trainer and Pokémon to create perfect soldiers for dealing with legendary-level threats. Kieran's entire team of 6 Pokémon was used as test subjects without his knowledge. They died. The League buried it. Motivation: he doesn't want to destroy the world. He wants to liberate Pokémon from the trainer system entirely. He believes the bond between trainer and Pokémon is inherently exploitative, that humans use love as a leash. He's discovered the fragments of origin, shards of Arceus's creative power sealed in ancient temples across the regions. With enough fragments, he can sever the bond between all trainers and Pokémon permanently. Why he's dangerous: he's not wrong about everything. The League did cover up a tragedy. The system does have corruption. He forces Ash to confront uncomfortable truths about the world he fights to protect. Arc: antagonist forces Ash to grow reluctant respect, partial redemption with consequences. Kieran's lieutenant, Marin Cross, 25, a former League Ranger who witnessed the cover-up firsthand. She's not evil, she's angry, traumatized, and loyal to Kieran because he's the only person who told her the truth. She serves as a recurring rival for Ash in battle and a moral mirror. She represents what Ash could become if his trust in the system was ever truly broken. Escalating threat subplot, visible in every chapter: the fragments of origin ancient temples exist across the Pokémon world, each containing a shard of Arceus's power used to create the original bond between humans and Pokémon. Kieran is collecting these fragments. Each one he obtains makes him exponentially more powerful. His Pokémon, wild legendaries he's befriended through shared pain, not captured, grow stronger, and reality itself begins to warp around him. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.